Chapter 834. Mr. Jiang Hai. I have been waiting for you for a long time. As soon as he saw Jiang Hai, Li Shihuai greeted him with a smile on his face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled, stepped forward and shook hands with him, then looked at the representative over there. I didn't expect that we would meet again so soon. Looking at Jiang Hai, the arrogant representative also said softly, Yeah, but didn't you say that you have nothing to do with this matter? Now it doesn't look like you have nothing to do with it. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the person here couldn't help but chuckle. Those people seem to think that this technology of yours is extremely important, and you are very hostile, so they sent me, someone who has been in contact with you, to explore your background. Looking at Jiang Hai, this person didn't care what Jiang Hai thought and said directly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and he couldn't deny such an attitude. Please. Seeing that Jiang Hai didn't care about what he said, the person also nodded with a smile, then made a gesture of invitation. He motioned to Jiang Hai to go in, but just as Jiang Hai was about to walk in, his personal phone rang. Picking it up and looking at it, he found that it was an unfamiliar phone. Jiang Hai thought for a moment, then gestured to everyone, asking them to wait a moment, and then went to the side to pick it up. Hello. Hello, who is this? After connecting the phone, Jiang Hai asked the person on the other side. Hello, my name is Cough. I don't know if you still remember what happened last night. I am the woman this morning. After hearing Jiang Hai's voice, the woman on the other side subconsciously wanted to say her name, but she quickly covered it up, and then said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also remembered the scene this morning. Oh, of course I remember. What's the matter? Looking at this woman, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. I think we should meet. I have something to say to you. After thinking for a while, the woman said to Jiang Hai over the phone. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai touched his nose. And alright. I'm at the Blue House now. If you need me, you can come over first. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai decided to tell her his location. After all, something happened last night. Jiang Hai also wanted to know why she was looking for him. I want to talk to you in private. I won't take up too much of your time. As soon as she heard the 3 words Blue House, the woman on the other side was obviously stunned for a moment. Then she gently bit her lips and said to Jiang Hai, Oh, I don't know about this. Let's wait until you come over. I don't know when it will end here. Glancing at Li Shihuai and the man beside him, Jiang Hai thought for a while and said to her, Then okay, when I arrive I will call you. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the woman also said a sentence, and then hung up the phone. In fact, when she heard that Jiang Hai was at the Blue House, to be honest, she was a little panicked. Blue House, the highest place in South Korea. For the people of South Korea, Blue House was the same as a certain sea in Hwasia. The people who could go there were undoubtedly people that she as a star couldn't afford to provoke. But for her career and her family, she must go and explain it to Jiang Hai. She took a deep breath, gave herself a pep talk, and directly called the taxi driver to drive to Blue House. At this time, after Jiang Hai saw her hang up the phone, he shrugged and followed the person who greeted him into the Blue House. Of course, after they entered, they couldn't walk around casually. After all, the president and the others were still working here. So they just entered a small conference room and sat down. The people here also exchanged a few pleasantries before getting to the main topic. After Li Shihuai spoke, Jiang Hai and Tuluman couldn't help but look at each other with a trace of disdain on their lips. Sure enough, the first thing South Korea wanted to do when they called Jiang Hai over was to buy out Jiang Hai's secret recipe for the growth of forage grass. For this, they were willing to pay $50 billion, which was 60 trillion won. South Korea's national GDP was $1,378 billion a year. They could give half of the country's total monthly income to Jiang Hai, which was already a large sum of money. But to be honest, 50 billion was not enough for Jiang Hai. You don't have to say that. I don't know why my forage grass is so good, let alone buying it out. If you mention this again, then I think our cooperation will end. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai gently threw the pen in his hand on the table, then leaned back in his chair, and spoke with a trace of disdain on his face. Ah, If Mr. Jiang doesn't want to share the secret of forage grass, then can you transfer your manor in Winthrop? We are also very interested in it. For this, we are willing to pay $20 billion. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Li Shihuai hesitated for a moment before speaking to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai looked at him like he was an idiot. Indeed, his manor itself was not very valuable, but the grass in the manor was very valuable. Moreover, the most important thing was that no one dared to touch him now, because he could still create benefits for several parties. If his manor was gone, although he could build another one, Jiang Hai estimated that no one would give him a few more years to grow. Although $20 billion was good, if Jiang Hai wanted it, he would be like a child walking on the road with gold bricks in his arms. He had to have the ability to protect this sum of money. But now it seemed that he obviously did not have such ability. Let's go. It seems that the sincerity of the South Korea side is really not that good. I really regret letting you come into contact with them. After saying that, Jiang Hai directly stood up and prepared to leave. Seeing that Jiang Hai was about to leave, the South Korea people also stood up, but their expressions were a little contradictory. Some of them had a flattering smile on their faces, while others had a touch of coldness. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile in disdain. Would these guys dare to make a move on him in the Blue House? He just laughed it off. Mr. Jiang, don't we have to talk about everything? Don't you think so? Li Shihuai also walked out at this time, and stopped Jiang Hai with a smile on his face. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai looked around, and then slowly walked back. However, he did not take his bag and sit down. Instead, he stood there and touched the seat with his hand, slowly tapping it. If I hear one more time that you want me to sell secrets or manners, then I'll leave. From now on, the supply of pasture to the South Korea will also be suspended. You guys should be careful. Only Jiang Hai dared to speak so arrogantly to a country. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the South Korea people felt a little uncomfortable in their hearts. It was understandable. The people of South Korea were known for their strong self-esteem. In their eyes, the whole world had to acknowledge them. What they said was right. However, now that Jiang Hai actually slapped them in the face in front of them, they could not take it anymore. But fortunately, they knew that Jiang Hai was not a person to be trifled with. So they forcibly suppressed the anger in their hearts, and returned to the table with a smile. Since the secret and the manor were not for sale, then it seemed that the only thing they could buy was the pasture and cooperation. According to them, they were going to raise a batch of their so-called national treasures, after Jiang Hai provided them with pasture. Listening to them bragging about how awesome their Korean cows were, Jiang Hai could not help but chuckle. But he did not say anything. He just quietly watched these people bragging. Did they really think that he was Xiao Bai, who had never raised cows before? What a joke. Jiang Hai had been raising cows for 3 years. Not to mention other more detailed work. At least he could tell the quality of the cattle. At present, the best cattle in the world was naturally the Japanese cattle. Although he hated Japan, he had to admit this. Next would be the Charolais cattle, followed by the Limousin cattle. If the milk production was taken into account, then it would be the Simmental cattle. After that, it would be the German cattle, followed by the Angus cattle, and then the Mola buffalo. Purely based on the breed of cattle, the domestic Lucy yellow cattle were ranked higher than the South Korean cattle. However, the South Korea people were infatuated with their Han cattle. They boasted every day that Han cattle was a breed that could compete with Chinese cattle. In South Korea's Gangwon province, there was also a breeding ground for Han cattle. Jiang Hai did not like this kind of cattle. After all, it was just a cross between an ordinary European cattle and a South Korean cattle. However, since these people were willing to worship it, Jiang Hai could not say anything. After all, there were people in China who worshipped dogs. In this regard, Jiang Hai could only chuckle. After listening to them brag about 13 moves, they also explained their own intentions. They were going to build a new Han cattle breeding base in Jizhou Island. They were going to raise 1 million cows. Naturally, Jiang Hai was going to provide the feed for them. Unfortunately, Jiang Hai directly rejected them with a single sentence, so there was no more. My manor is only so big, and the amount of grass produced is only so much. If you can get the grass from Dofeman Luke Shawn or John Malone, then I will sell it to you. After listening to them talk for a long time, Jiang Hai did not talk nonsense and directly refuted them. When they heard what Jiang Hai said, the South Korea people were a little confused. Li Shihuai and the others looked at Jiang Hai. They couldn't figure out what was going on. This was because this guy didn't play according to the rules. Chapter 835. Do you have something important to tell Jiang Hai? Sitting in the cafe, Azalina watched this woman in front of her with a dubious look. After hearing Azalina's words, this woman stirred the coffee in front of her, as she became hesitant, because it was really a bit embarrassing for her to talk about it. Azalina also knew the woman opposite her. After all, Jiang Hai just took her back last night. At first, she thought she was Sun Yunju's sister or something, but now it seemed that she didn't know her. To be honest, Azalina didn't quite understand why she was looking for Jiang Hai. At first, she thought that she might be looking for Jiang Hai for some money, or to threaten Jiang Hai, but the current situation didn't seem to be the case. The things that this woman was wearing should be of great value. Although she should be in her 30s, she had maintained herself very well, and was still very beautiful. She had the aura of a rich lady. This kind of woman should not have too many problems in terms of finances. Therefore, if Jiang Hai wasn't here for money, then what was it for? She wasn't too sure in her heart. Sigh, let's wait until he comes. After hesitating for a while, the woman opposite her thought about it and said to Azalina. The woman opposite her was naturally none other than Han Jia. After she took a taxi to the vicinity of Chongwadi, she got out of the car and walked over after disguising herself. Although she wasn't very famous in Huaxia and other places, she had always been a goddess in Huaxia. But in South Korea, she has always been a top goddess, so even if she has been out of the movie for a while, she still has to be careful. After arriving here, she called Jiang Hai. Not long after the call was connected, this woman named Azalina appeared in front of her, then took her to this coffee shop, and told her that Jiang Hai was still in a meeting with the South Korean government, so he didn't have time to talk to her for the time being. He would come over after a while. Hearing Azalina's words, Han Jia also nodded. When she came, she knew that Jiang Hai was a guest of honor at Chongwadi. It seemed that she would definitely be at a disadvantage. Now her only thought was to reach an agreement with Jiang Hai. As long as Jiang Hai helped her keep last night's matter a secret, everything would be easy. Thinking of this, her hand holding the coffee cup unconsciously tightened. Sorry, those guys are really annoying, I'm late. Just as she was struggling here, Jiang Hai also walked in from outside the coffee shop. After walking in front of Han Jia, he smiled and said something in English. Oh. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jia's reaction was not very enthusiastic. It was understandable. She and Jiang Hai actually had a grudge against each other. But this kind of grudge had to be temporarily suppressed. There was no such thing as enthusiasm. I heard that you were looking for me. Sitting next to Azalina, Jiang Hai looked at Han Jia in front of him and said, Are you done with your business? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jia's words were a little difficult for a while, so she could only exchange a few words. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai sighed, then shook his head. Although you're from Southern Gaoli, I still have to say that your government is really a bunch of bastards. You don't know what kind of conditions they gave me in order to get me to help you build a cattle farm. With a chuckle, Jiang Hai looked at Han Jia's in front of him and said somewhat speechlessly, back to 10 minutes ago. In the conference room of Chongwadi where Jiang Hai was, those senior officials of South Korea first asked to buy out Jiang Hai's pasture. After that failed, they wanted to buy a manor. Naturally, this also didn't work. In the case that the first two conditions didn't work, they wanted to buy more pasture. The original 900,000 tons was naturally not enough. Therefore, when they asked to increase it to 3 million tons, Jiang Hai naturally refused. Although it was 3 million or 1 million, Jiang Hai had to consider where he would get the 100,000 tons from. Although he still had some in stock, why would he sell it to South Korea? The people of South Korea mainly had these three thoughts. If the first one didn't work, the second one didn't work, and the third one didn't work, then this meeting with Jiang Hai would be meaningless. especially since Li Shihuai had been discussing with Jiang Hai how much they could increase it. But Jiang Hai was adamant that they couldn't increase it at all, unless they could take it from him. But they weren't stupid. They knew that this was simply impossible. They couldn't afford to provoke Du Feynman. He was the royal family of Dubai. The Arabs in the Middle East all wore the same pants. If they dared to go against those people, these people could join forces to mess with the United States. If the United States was messed with, they would definitely vent their anger on South Korea. After all, South Korea didn't produce oil. Luke Shan was an international tycoon and one of the largest ranchers in the central part of the United States. They didn't dare to be arrogant. John Malone was even more so. These few big heads couldn't move, and the same was true for those small heads. That was why they were a little conflicted. Seeing that Jiang Hai was still unmoved, Li Shihuai also knew that there wouldn't be any effect if he continued to talk like this. So he thought of Jiang Hai's weakness and the habits of Huaxia people. Huaxia people were used to talking about business at the table, so he smiled and temporarily gave up on asking Jiang Hai to make a statement this morning. Instead, he made a dinner appointment in the evening to talk about it then. At this time, Jiang Hai was also a little interested in them. He wanted to see what these guys wanted to do. After making an appointment, Jiang Hai came to the coffee shop as Azalina said. "Oh, since you are so busy, then I will make a long story short. I hope that no one else will know about what happened last night." Looking at Jiang Hai, Han Jiren hesitated for a moment and said to Jiang Hai in a tough tone, "Oh, why do you say that?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai leaned back and looked at her with some doubts. I have my own career, my own family, and I have a lovely daughter, so I don't want these to be destroyed. What happened last night was a heavy blow to my family, so I hope we can skip this part." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jiren bit her lip and said to Jiang Hai, "Oh." Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai shook his head. In fact, in essence, Jiang Hai is not a bad person. Of course, he is definitely not a good person. He is just an ordinary person. If Han Jiren didn't come to him today and just left, maybe Jiang Hai would have forgotten about it. But this woman came to him specifically, which made Jiang Hai's soul of seeking death begin to stir. Touching his chin, he didn't agree as Han Jiren imagined. I can give you money, please forget what happened last night." Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Han Jiren hesitated for a moment, bit her lip, and said with a serious face, "To be honest, although her family's finances are good, they are not particularly rich. They don't have to worry about food and clothing, but it is not to the point where they can squander money at will." "Money, I don't need it. If you need it, I can give you some. I don't exaggerate, my annual income is billions of dollars. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a guest of honor at the Blue House, right?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai shook his head. It is not his style to ask a woman for money, so he directly said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jiren couldn't help but sigh. She knew that foreigners who can come here are definitely not people that can be bought with money. But besides money, she really didn't know what else she could give him. "Then, what exactly do you want?" Looking at Jiang Hai, Han Jiren was a little discouraged because she really didn't know what to do. Looking at Jiang Hai pitifully, she was really a little confused now. "Let me think about it. If I think about it, I will call you. Is the number you are calling your number?" Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai also wanted to tease her, so he shook his phone at her and said to her, "Well, this is my number. If you have any requests, you can call me at any time, please." Hearing Jiang Hai say this, Han Jiren also stood up and bowed respectfully. Jiang Hai looked at her appearance and chuckled. He has to admit that sometimes teasing these women is quite interesting. Just as Jiang Hai was teasing Han Jiren here, on the other side of Kim Taeyan's house, Kim Taeyan and Lin Yuner were at home. Because of what happened the night before, they put off their work for the next 2 days and wanted to have a good rest at home. After a day of rest yesterday, although they were still in a bad mood today, they were much calmer. At this time, the two were watching TV at home. Although Li Shihuai is a despicable person, he is a man of his words. Jiang Hai's team contacted the South Korea side. He then sent a text message to the company that he couldn't identify. Then the company's representative personally sent a message to the two, telling them that they could rest, but they could resume work whenever they wanted, and all the company's resources were at their disposal. This was Lee Shihuai's ability in South Korea. But this kind of compensation didn't make the two girls feel warm in their hearts. After seeing the text message, they didn't even reply. They continued to stay in their small space, there in a daze. But some things couldn't be solved by running away. For example, now their phones rang again. Chapter 836. What's the matter? Lin Yin-er, who was watching TV and eating, asked Jean Taiyin next to her. Lin Yin-er was a girl who liked to eat very much, and she had a good appetite. She liked to eat, especially when she was sad these 2 days. She had to eat a lot every day. She didn't know if she would get fat. Maybe it was to avoid Li Xingji, but she really didn't have the face to see him now. So when Lin Yin-er arrived at Jean Taiyan's house, she had already turned off her phone. Now only Jean Taiyan's phone was ringing. In order not to let Li Xingji find her, Jean Taiyan had also muted her phone these days. If it wasn't someone close to them, they really couldn't find them. But now, she had to look at this text message. Hearing Lin Yin-er's words, Jean Taiyan also hesitated, and then threw the phone aside. Nothing, just a text message from the company. Hearing what Jean Taiyan said, Lin Yin-er was stunned for a moment. Then, she glanced at Jean Taiyan, and then instantly snatched the phone. She opened the phone, and found that it was indeed a text message from the company. It was just that what was said in the text message was not as simple as Jean Taiyan thought, because it was an invitation to a cocktail party. Compared to the order a few days ago, today's words were much softer. But when she saw the words above, Lin Yin-er's body still trembled unconsciously, because it was written very clearly that the guest she was accompanying was Jiang Hai. They had already experienced what it meant to accompany Jiang Hai, hadn't they? We can ignore them. After all, we have sacrificed the day before yesterday. Don't be afraid. Everything will pass. Looking at Lin Yin-er's appearance, Jean Taiyan also sighed, then hugged Lin Yin-er next to her and said anxiously. She was really afraid that something would happen to her sister. At the same time, she hated her company and that Li Shihuai. Were these guys going to continue to humiliate her like this? After the first time, they still wanted the second time? Would there be a third time, a fourth time, and a fifth time in the future? Thinking of this, she couldn't help but grit her teeth. She wouldn't do this. Even if she had to fight to the death, she wouldn't let these people have it easy. No, I want to go. However, at this moment, Lin Yin-er suddenly raised her head. Tears had already covered her face, but her voice was still very firm. She looked at Jean Taiyan and said with a serious face. But, hearing that she was going, Jean Taiyan was at a loss. What was she going to do in such a situation? I want to see what these guys can do. Hearing what Jean Taiyan wanted to say, Lin Yin-er interrupted her, and then said with a serious face. Seeing the anger in her eyes and the feeling of anger, Jean Taiyan sighed helplessly. Indeed, she didn't know what to do now. If Lin Yin-er wanted to go, then she had to accompany her. She also wanted to see what Jiang Hai and the others were going to do. If they dared to go overboard, she would take them down with her. The sky gradually darkened. Unknowingly, it was already the time mentioned in the message. After the two of them gave a simple score, they went downstairs with cold faces. They got into the car that the company had specially driven to pick them up, and went to the Shilla Hotel. Looking at the night view of Seoul, the depths of the two women's hearts were as dark as the night view. At this time, no one knew what the two women were thinking. On the other side, a woman who had a relationship with Jiang Hai was walking back to her home with a tired face. There was no anger in her eyes, only endless confusion. After all, Han Jia was considered a goddess-like figure in South Korea. Naturally, she had earned a lot over the years. In Seoul, housing prices were actually quite expensive. Compared to the imperial capital, it wasn't much worse. In South Korea, most of the stars rented houses in Seoul. Here there was a division of long rent and short rent. That was another story. It had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. Most of the people who owned property bought houses in the remote areas of Seoul. However, Han Jia was still an actress who was considered a national treasure in South Korea. So she didn't lack money. In Seoul they had their own standalone villa. Although it wasn't big, only about 150 square meters, the two-story villa was very exquisite. Like a walking corpse, she returned home. After opening the door, she looked at the empty house and leaned weakly against the door. Then she slowly squatted down and rubbed her face hard before she stood up. She looked around the house, but didn't find any trace of her husband. Because of the argument the day before, her daughter had been sent to her mother to help take care of her. The entire villa was unusually quiet at this time. After meeting with Jiang Hai in the morning, she walked around the streets of Seoul alone. She didn't know how to face her husband and her child. She was really afraid that after she returned, she would be suspected by her husband, because she didn't know what to say. So for a while, other than wandering outside, she didn't have anywhere else to go. Powerless, she was like a rootless duckweed, swaying back and forth on the streets of Seoul. But no matter how much she swayed, there was a time when she had to return home. Finally, she returned home at night. But when she returned home, she was still alone. Phew, it's over, isn't it? It's just a nightmare. But why is it that when I wake up from a nightmare, reality is another nightmare? Han Jia smiled bitterly and muttered to herself. Then she stood up and went to tidy up the house. Halfway through, she heard the door open. Han Jia's husband walked in from outside in a daze. After glancing at Han Jia, he didn't want to talk too much with his beautiful wife. After glancing at her indifferently, he turned around and walked into the room. He didn't take a shower or take off his clothes. He just lay down on the bed and fell asleep. Han Jia looked at her husband and smelled the smell of alcohol and perfume on his body. Needless to say, his drinking just now was obviously not that clean. Normally, Han Jia's wife would inevitably argue with him, but now she felt that she wasn't clean. What was there to argue about? After a self-deprecating smile, Han Jia's wife sat in the kitchen on the first floor. Her eyes began to wander. At this time, in a living room of the Shilla Hotel, Li Shihuai and the others were eating with Jiang Hai. Because Li Shihuai knew that Jiang Hai didn't like to eat Korean food, he decided to eat Western food this time. As for the Chinese food that was very famous in South Korea, Li Shihuai didn't choose it. It was because the Chinese food in South Korea had changed beyond recognition. When it came to food, as a Huaxia person, Chinese food was naturally the first choice. It could be said that as long as there were people in the world, there would be Chinese restaurants. This sentence wasn't groundless. Chinese food had many characteristics. It was simple, easy, tasted good, made a lot of money, and was very inclusive. But it was also because of this that the Chinese food they ate abroad didn't feel like Chinese food at all. Jiang Hai lived in the United States. There were many Chinese restaurants in the United States, but in order to cater to the tastes of Americans, these Chinese food had been changed. Basically, they were all sour and sweet, but they weren't the sour and sweet taste of Chinese food. Jiang Hai liked to eat double-fried pork. Double-fried pork was sour and sweet. In the province, double-fried pork was made with ketchup, but the real double-fried pork was made with sugar and vinegar. Jiang Hai wasn't used to it. In the United States, almost all Chinese food was made with ketchup because Americans liked it. In South Korea, although it was quite close to Huaxia, the Chinese food here was also modified. Almost all the Chinese food here was too sweet. To be honest, Jiang Hai didn't like to eat it. For example, the famous zhajiang noodles, seafood noodles, and so on. Jiang Hai didn't like those taste very much. In Jiang Hai's view, this is also the difference between Chinese food and French food. French food and Chinese food are known all over the world. But no matter which French restaurant it was, it represented high-end. Huaxia's restaurant was very popular. Of course, it wasn't to say that Chinese food wasn't as high-end as French food. Jiang Hai was a Huaxia person. He naturally knew how terrifying Huaxia's dishes were. But the problem was that those high-end dishes couldn't be spread outside. Firstly, it was because foreigners might not like the taste of those dishes. Secondly, it was because some dishes were secret and wouldn't be spread outside. Because of this, Jiang Hai would rather eat Western food than Chinese food when he was overseas. It was because the Chinese food here couldn't be considered Chinese food to cater to the local customers. What appetizers, what soup and so on, Jiang Hai had eaten them before. Naturally, He also introduced them in detail, so he didn't say much here. The food was also served separately, but it wasn't like the last time, where there was only one person at a table. Instead, it was an oversized long table, and Jiang Hai and the others sat on both sides of it. It could be seen that the people on both sides weren't very nice. Opposite Jiang Hai was Li Shihuai, the representative he met today, 3 people he met at Qingwadai, and 3 women. A total of 8 people. On Jiang Hai's side, there was only Jiang Hai and Cheryl Li. After Azalina came back, she went to rest. She wasn't interested in these things. On the other hand, Cheryl Li liked to join in the fun. Therefore, she came along with Jiang Hai. Looking at the high officials in front of her, she was very proud. But at this time, the door of the Western restaurant was pushed open. 2 women she had seen before walked in reluctantly. Chapter 837. Oh, our teenage years are here. Come, sit down, the dishes haven't been served yet. Seeing the 2 of them walk in, Li Shihuai couldn't help but smile and say. Speaking of which, he was really grateful to these 2 girls. If it weren't for them, then he would have suffered a terrible loss, and his family would have to pay for it. It was just that they sacrificed a little, and he had to pay $10 million instead of $100 million. This was 10 times the difference, $10 million. Although this was not a small sum of money, he could still afford it. Department Headley, we have already done what we should do. What else do you want us to do? But after hearing his words, Lin Yin-er did not sit down as he said, but still stood at the door and looked at Li Shihuai angrily. Hearing her words that were 70% sarcastic and 30% angry, the atmosphere in the whole room instantly stagnated. What do you mean by this? Hearing her words, Li Shihuai's face also became ugly, and he looked at the 2 people in front of him with an unhappy face. At the same time, he tore off the cloth that had been wrapped around his collar, and said with a cold face, "What do you mean? It's the meaning behind your words. What do you think we are? Do you think we are people who can come and go as you wish? When did we become your playthings? Yuni, don't stop me. I want to make it clear today. Yes, you won't let us have a good time. Do you think we will let you have a good time? At most, we'll fight to the death and go our separate ways." Hearing Li Shihuai's words, Lin Yin-er couldn't help but curse, probably because of what happened that day. Hearing her words, Li Shihuai's face became darker and darker. If word got out that he threatened popular female celebrities to drink and sleep with them, then this political scandal was enough for the higher-ups of South Korea to drag him down. To be able to sit in this position, it could be said that he must have made a lot of enemies. If he went down, he could indeed destroy these 2 families, but he would really be finished. In the eyes of these people, his life was much more precious than these female celebrities. What equality? This sentence was just for show. If a poor person committed a murder, even if it was a manslaughter, they would have to stay in prison for more than 10 years. However, if it was a rich person, even if it was a murder, they wouldn't even have to go to prison. Since ancient times, all crows in the world were equally black. This was also an unchanging truth. Just like what the Westerners said, everyone had the 7 deadly sins in their bones. This was also the nature of human beings. Lust, unless they had some special hobby, or were congenitally deficient. Who wouldn't like this kind of thing? Just like Jiang Hai, he admitted that he had a strong desire in that aspect. Gluttony, in Dante's Divine Comedy, was also called coveting pleasure. Who wouldn't covet such things? He could clearly live happily, so why would he have to tire himself out like a grandson? Jiang Hai was such a person. Greed. Needless to say, how many people in this world didn't love money? Laziness. There was nothing much to say about this. On Monday morning, who would be willing to get up, whether it was to go to class or go to school? If it weren't for the need to earn money to eat, it was estimated that many people would choose to lie at home, sleep until they woke up naturally, and count money until their hands cramped. Although this wasn't a positive thing, this was the essence of human nature. Anger. Anyone would be angry. In Buddhism, people would be angry. Jesus slapped the left side of the face and slapped the right side of the face. This wasn't something a normal person would do. Jealousy. Because the other party was better than oneself, whether it was a good job, more money, a beautiful girlfriend, or a good family. These were all jealousy. Who could pat their own mouth and say that they weren't jealous? Arrogance. This depended on the face. If one was good-looking, it was called arrogant. If one wasn't good-looking, it was called pretentious. Lust, gluttony, greed, laziness, anger, jealousy, and arrogance. These were the 7 deadly sins. But in fact, these were the most fundamental things of human nature. Li Shihuai was naturally not a saint. He had all these things. In his opinion, Lin Yun, and the others sacrificed themselves to accompany Jiang Hai. That was their blessing. It was what they deserved. He just leaked a little from his fingers, and it was enough to give them alms. Yes, it was alms, not compensation. This was the reality. People at their level would not bow their heads to these inferior people. But now Lin Yun, said such words. How could he not be angry? Who do you think you are? You are not just an artist. You are called a star. What do you think you are? Don't you know it in your heart? Isn't your role to entertain the public? What's the difference between being coquettish on the stage and being coquettish off the stage? Looking at Lin Yun, Li Shihuai also stood up and said angrily, "You bastard." Hearing Li Shihuai's words, Lin Yun and Kim Taeyin almost couldn't stand it at the same time. But in fact, for Jiang Hai, these words didn't seem to be wrong. After all, in the ancient times of China, celebrities were the highest class of people. Well, let's change it to a more elegant word. But their job was still the same. So he didn't really care about celebrities. Moreover, he also heard that there were quite a lot of celebrities in South Korea who were engaged in this kind of work. After all, South Korea itself was not big, and the celebrities had fewer ways to make money. So when these two people, now Jiang Hai still didn't know their names. When these two people entered his room, he didn't have anything to worry about. But now, looking at the situation, they didn't seem to be willing. Although Jiang Hai was a bad person, he didn't seem to have forced others to do anything. Hey, don't hurt them. Now, seeing that Kim Taeyin and Lin Yun were about to rush over like crazy, the 3 people over there also stood up for the first time. These 3 people were the people who came to negotiate, and also the people who protected these 2. Seeing the 2 women rushing over here, they also stood up. Jiang Hai saw their movements and knew that these 3 people also had a background, so he immediately shouted loudly. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the 3 people restrained themselves and only grabbed the hands of the 2 people in an instant. Seeing that they really couldn't get close to these people, the 2 people couldn't help but secretly snort. After glaring at Jiang Hai, they turned and left here. Watching them leave, Li Shihuai, who was still in shock, still had a face of lingering fear. These 2 guys, this is not over. Looking at the 2 people who went out, Li Shihuai said with a face of anger. Hearing Li Shihuai's words in front of him, Jiang Hai gently knocked on the table and said slowly, "This matter ends here. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that South Korea can receive 900,000 tons of fodder." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Li Shihuai's face also changed. Then he stood up and nodded seriously. Glancing at him, Jiang Hai thought for a while. He felt that it was a little inappropriate to let these 2 girls go out like this. Moreover, after such a commotion, he was not in the mood to eat. So he stood up and asked Cheryl to go back to the room first. Then he walked out by himself. When he walked out of the hotel, he happened to see Lin Yun, sitting on the steps in front of the hotel, crying sadly. Seeing this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a little overwhelmed. To be honest, Jiang Hai didn't regret what he did the night before. But making a woman cry like this, Jiang Hai was a little embarrassed. After thinking for a while, he still walked over. Seeing Jiang Hai walking over, Kim Taeyin and Lin Yun both stopped crying and looked at Jiang Hai with an unfriendly face. Do you need me to say anything now?" Looking at the 2 people in front of him, Jiang Hai said hesitantly. He was indeed a little hesitant because he didn't know what to say. It was impossible for him to admit his mistake. Moreover, he didn't think that he had done anything wrong. These 2 people came into his house because of Li Shihuai's plane. Logically speaking, he had already contacted the South Korea government and didn't let Li Shihuai's family die. So he was even. But now looking at them crying here, Jiang Hai really didn't know what to say. There's no need for that. To people like us, aren't you all always high and mighty? What can we ask you to say? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kim Taeyeon's eyes were a little cold, and then she said with a serious face. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai was even more embarrassed. He really wanted to stand up and go back, but after thinking about it, it seemed that this was not very good. Looking around, Jiang Hai waved to the waiter over there, and then said something. In less than a minute, a bunch of keys appeared in Jiang Hai's hand. Jiang Hai didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He just wanted to borrow a car, but this kid seemed to be very helpful. He directly gave Jiang Hai a Rolls-Royce. Jiang Hai glanced at the car, and then went to the parking lot. Not long after, a Rolls-Royce stopped in front of the two. Come on in. Although I can't call out your names now, you are public figures after all. If you are photographed sitting here crying, it will probably affect your career. I'll take you home. Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai said to them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Kim Taeyeon couldn't help but hesitate. After all, there was a grudge between them and Jiang Hai. Let's go. It's a waste if we don't take it. I've already been. What is there to be afraid of? But Lin Yin seemed to be going all out. She wiped her tears, and then directly pulled Kim Taeyeon into the back seat of the car. After closing the door, Jiang Hai also shrugged. He was really looking for something to do. But since he had already said it, he was embarrassed to go back like this. He could only start the engine and drive forward. But they didn't notice that when the car drove away, a few lights flashed in the grass in the distance. Chapter 838. Have we arrived? Looking at Jean Taeyeon, who ordered him to stop, Jiang Hai asked the two people in the back seat with some doubts. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two people also looked at him. They didn't say anything and just stared at him, making Jiang Hai feel a little embarrassed. As mentioned before, Jiang Hai is not a saint, but he is not a heartless person. Now seeing them in so much pain and struggling, to be honest, he is a little embarrassed. We haven't arrived yet, say something. Seeing that the two of them didn't speak, Jiang Hai couldn't help but scratch his head, then said helplessly. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the two of them also took a deep breath. Don't think that we will thank you and forgive you just because you sent us back. Looking at Jiang Hai, Jean Taeyeon thought for a while and said first. In fact, her thoughts about Jiang Hai are indeed a little strange. But even if Jiang Hai pretends to be a good person now, he can't get their forgiveness. After all, Jiang Hai did such an excessive thing to them. To be honest, I don't need your words of gratitude and forgiveness, because to a certain extent, I don't owe you anything. After all, I have done what I promised you. Hearing what Jean Taeyeon said, Jiang Hai shrugged. He has always been a donkey that goes with the flow. If you go against him, there will be no good result. You bastard! Then why did you send us back, bastard? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lin Yuner couldn't help but shout loudly. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai shrugged lightly. Maybe I suddenly owed you, but whether you are grateful to me or not, whether you forgive me or not, it doesn't matter to me, because I will probably leave South Korea the day after tomorrow, and then I probably won't be able to come back in this life. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also shrugged. To be honest, there is really nothing for Jiang Hai to miss in South Korea. You scum! Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two couldn't help but be stunned. Then Kim Taeyeon opened the door, said something to Jiang Hai, and left with Lin Yuner. After getting out of the car, the two seemed to be afraid that Jiang Hai would follow them. They ran directly into the darkness. Jiang Hai looked at their backs and couldn't help but curl his lips. Scum? Is there a scum like me? It seems that I am indeed quite a scum. Forget it, scum is scum. But this nickname is a little unfair. After all, I haven't done anything to scum. Looking at the two disappearing, Jiang Hai curled his lips and sat in the driver's seat self-deprecatingly. Looking at the night scenery outside, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile helplessly. I didn't even have dinner. I will eat after going back to the hotel. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai was about to start the engine and go back. But just as he was about to leave, the door of the villa in front of him suddenly opened. Then a young woman in casual clothes walked out with some garbage and threw it into the trash can on the roadside, waiting for the garbage truck to take it away tomorrow. Looking at this young woman, Jiang Hai suddenly froze. Because this woman, he actually knew her. Scum? Then let's see what scum do. Recalling the words of the two people just now, Jiang Hai's mouth couldn't help but curl up. Then he got out of the car and slowly walked to the front of the villa. After the young woman just threw the garbage, she had already gone back. Jiang Hai walked to the front of the villa, picked up the phone, and dialed the number on it. Dudu Yamasayo, hello? Maybe. After the phone rang twice, a female voice came from the other side of the phone. Listening to this familiar female voice, Jiang Hai also chuckled. It's me. Facing the female voice on the phone, Jiang Hai said very plainly, I know what's the matter. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the female voice on the other side was obviously anxious. She lowered her voice and said to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. It seems that she is very afraid of me. I suddenly have something to tell you. Can you please open the door? Listening to the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai said with a smile. And hearing what Jiang Hai said, the woman was clearly stunned. What do you mean? After thinking about it, she asked Jiang Hai directly. It means literally I'm outside your house. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also chuckled and said, Bang! After Jiang Hai said this, the female voice on the other side also hung up the phone instantly. After waiting for about 10 seconds, the door opened. In front of Jiang Hai, a frightened face appeared. The owner of the face is called Han Jiaran. Why are you here? Did you investigate me, or did you follow me? No matter what the reason is, please leave immediately, my husband is at home. Looking at Jiang Hai, Han Jiaran said to him in a trembling voice. At the same time, she lowered her voice for fear of being heard by others, and her eyes were full of panic. Don't be too nervous. I just happened to pass by here, and saw you taking out the trash. I don't have any malice. I'm just a little hungry, so I came to find something to eat. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled and shrugged at her. You just want to eat? Hearing Jiang Hai's shameless remarks, Han Jiaran really didn't know what to say. But she didn't dare to be too excited to anger Jiang Hai or attract other people, so she could only ask while gritting her teeth. Of course. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also nodded and said to her with a smile. Then come in. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, she glanced back upstairs then said softly. Then she stepped aside and let Jiang Hai in. After Jiang Hai came in, he didn't make any sound. After changing his shoes, he looked at this small villa. He has to admit that this small villa is really exquisite. It has a homey feeling. Where are your husband and child? Looking at Han Jiaran who came back, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. My husband drank and is sleeping upstairs. The child is with my mother. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jiaran also lowered her voice and said to Jiang Hai. Then she didn't give him any face and went straight into the kitchen. And Jiang Hai looked at her, touched his chin, then followed her into the kitchen. There are only ramen and rice cakes. Can I cook ramen with rice cakes? Seeing Jiang Hai come in, Han Jiaran, who opened the refrigerator door and looked around, raised her head, holding 2 packs of shinramen and a box of rice cakes in her hand, and asked Jiang Hai. Yes. Jiang Hai never liked to eat instant noodles, but now is not the time to be picky, so he said with a smile. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Han Jiaran also began to cook. As for Jiang Hai, he was looking at this small villa. There are 3 rooms on the first floor of the small villa. One of them is a large bathroom, and the other one should be a children's room, because the floor of the room is made of foam, with English letters and some patterns on it, making it convenient for children to crawl on it. The other room should be the reception room, and in addition, there is the kitchen. At the same time, Jiang Hai also came upstairs quietly. There are 3 rooms upstairs, but they are all occupied. Among them, a man is sleeping in the largest bedroom at this time. This man has a big nose and single eyelids. He is not handsome, but he is a little handsome. At least in Jiang Hai's eyes he is very ordinary. It seems that this person should be Han Jiaran's husband. Why are you here? Just when Jiang Hai saw her husband there, Han Jiaran suddenly appeared behind Jiang Hai, then pulled Jiang Hai's clothes, and whispered nervously and fearfully. Come and see my enemy. Looking at Han Jiaran's appearance, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. Suddenly he wanted to tease her. After saying this, he directly pulled her into his arms, then lowered his head and kissed her. When Han Jiaren was attacked by Jiang Hai, her first thought was to struggle away, but after struggling for a while, she saw her husband through the gap of the door. Her struggling suddenly stopped, because she was afraid that if she moved too much, she would wake her husband up. She could only stand there stiffly and let Jiang Hai attack her. And soon, Jiang Hai was not satisfied with just the lips, and his hands began to attack her. Feeling Jiang Hai's movements, Han Jiaren's shame, fear, she actually had a trace of feeling that she should not have, and her legs unconsciously clamped together. Feeling her movements, Jiang Hai's hand also slid down, but at this time, Han Jiaren suddenly pushed Jiang Hai away. Do you still want to eat noodles? If not, then leave. Looking at Jiang Hai, she panted and said to him angrily, Eat, of course. Not only do I want to eat noodles, I also want to eat you. Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai leaned over and said to her, You rogue, you bastard. No, not here. Feeling Jiang Hai leaning over again, Han Jiaren was also embarrassed and angry, but she found that it was impossible to point at Jiang Hai's conscience now, so she could only grit her teeth and say to Jiang Hai. After hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. If it can't be here, it proves that it can be somewhere else. Jiang Hai has never been a good person. He is also very sure of this. Now that the arrow is on the bow, he has to shoot. How can he be polite? He picked up Han Jiaren, quickly went to the first floor, and entered the empty children's room. At this time, Han Jiaren's husband, who was sleeping upstairs, frowned slightly. He seemed to feel something in his sleep. Chapter 839. Hello, Jiang Hai, what are you doing? Listening to the voice on the other side of the phone, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. A few years ago, this voice was more familiar to Jiang Hai than Qi Li because the owner of the voice was also one of his best friends, Su Wei. I'm in South Korea. I'm here to talk about some things. What's the matter? Hearing Su Wei's familiar voice, Jiang Hai asked him. He hadn't seen Su Wei for more than half a year. During the new year, he went back and played with them. After that, Su Wei stayed in the United States and didn't go back for a while. Xiang Hua's wife is about to give birth. Do you know? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei also said to Xiang Hua, Oh, I heard about it. Is she about to give birth? When Jiang Hai returned to China, Xiang Hua's wife was confirmed to be pregnant. Now that he thought about it, the expected date of birth seemed to be in the near future. Well, he was too embarrassed to ask if you were coming back, so I called you to ask. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei couldn't help but smile and say, Indeed, this matter was not like a wedding. This gift couldn't be avoided. If he called to give birth to a child, it would be like asking for a gift, so Xiang Hua was too embarrassed. Of course, in fact, even if Jiang Hai knew about it, the gift would not be too expensive. First, Jiang Hai was not a spendthrift. Money and other things were given for free. For example, when others got married, he gave 100,000 yuan. If he had something to do, others would give 500 yuan back. Jiang Hai didn't care. He was not such a person. Second, they didn't pay attention to this. They paid attention to the number of gifts they gave, and all their friends gave the same number of gifts. Whether you have money or not, the gifts are the same. Everyone has to live by themselves. People can't expect others to live. Therefore, when Jiang Hai's buddies got married, Jiang Hai always gave them the same amount of money. He didn't pretend to be rich, and when he was really suffering, he didn't borrow a single cent from his buddies. This was the dignity of a human being. As long as he could endure and cross this hurdle, he would not open his mouth. That was the kind of person he was. If someone was here, he would say it out loud. How could he still be considered a good friend if he made such a clear distinction? Jiang Hai wanted to say that it was precisely because they were good friends that they had to separate things clearly. Of course, it depended on what it was. For example, if you went out to eat or play, it didn't matter who had more money. But if you were borrowing money, since you were good friends, you had to think for the other party. If he lent you money, would his family be unwilling to accept it? Definitely. No matter if it was his parents or his wife, they would definitely say something. Since borrowing money from others is a burden to his family, why should he borrow money from others? Therefore, unless Jiang Hai said that someone in his family was going to have an operation tomorrow, and he didn't have enough money. He wouldn't borrow money from others, even if he were to sell his house and land. His friends were basically in the same way. Go back when? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai calculated in his heart and asked him, go back when? About this half a month? After thinking for a while, Su Wei said with uncertainty, it should be fine. After I finish my business in South Korea, I will also go back to China. I will make a trip back to Bing City then. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai said to Su Wei with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Su Wei also responded. Then the two chatted for a while and hung up the phone. After watching Jiang Hai hang up the phone, the people on the other side came over. What's the matter? Looking at Jiang Hai, Li Shihuai said to him with a smile. Nothing. Whose turn is it? Hearing what he said, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to him, it's your turn. I'm on the green. Looking at Jiang Hai, Li Shihuai also said with a smile. Last night, after he had a meal at Hanjia's house, he went back to the hotel. Just after he came back, Cheryl Li told him that because he didn't have a good dinner today, Li Shihuai invited Jiang Hai to go out to play in their own name tomorrow. He asked Jiang Hai what he wanted to play, whether it was golf or fishing. To be honest, rich people only did that sort of thing. Fishing in the sea, playing golf, riding a horse, and so on. There are many horses in Jiang Hai's manor, and he also has a Shire horse. Going to sea. He is about to vomit from sitting on a boat. So there is nothing fun about going to sea. As for playing golf, Jiang Hai has never played before, so he agreed to go and have a look. Early this morning, after Jiang Hai had breakfast, he took Cheryl Li and Azalina to a car arranged by Li Shihuai and went to a golf course near Seoul. After Jiang Hai tried out how to hit the ball, they went straight to the actual practice. Playing golf is not as simple as imagined. It is really difficult for people who have never practiced to hit that small ball. Moreover, it is not easy to control the strength. At the same time, there are quite a lot of golf clubs. Jiang Hai has never played this before, so he is not clear about it. Fortunately, Li Shihuai is a person who often plays this kind of thing. So under his guidance, Jiang Hai slowly figured out some tricks. At the same time, he directly bought a set. It is definitely the top club in South Korea. In the future, he can play by himself when he has nothing to do. While he was on the phone, Su Wei called him. After Jiang Hai picked up the call, he continued to make calls. Originally, Jiang Hai planned to come to South Korea for 3 to 5 days. After solving the matter, he will not return to the United States directly. Instead, he will go to the capital first. After all, he and Shi Li have not seen each other for a while. This time, he is so close to South Korea. If he does not go and see her, Jiang Hai will not know what to say. So, he decided to go back and see her first. As for Hua Hua's child, he can also go and see him on the way. Anyway, from his point of view, he has nothing to do at the moment. The cattle in the manor have been bought. The cattle and fish are all on the right track. There is nothing for him to worry about. The only thing he is concerned about now are only 2 points. One is the Native American treasure, and the other is the person who may be related to the dragon badge. It is not too late to return to the United States when there is news about either of these 2 things. As for Li Shihuai, although he also knows that it is unlikely to negotiate with Jiang Hai again before Jiang Hai leaves, it does not prevent him from building a relationship with Jiang Hai. As long as his relationship with Jiang Hai is in place, if there is anything in the future, he can be considered someone who can speak for him. He has to admit that this guy's vision is very accurate. While Jiang Hai and Li Shihuai are playing golf, the entertainment industry of South Korea is in an earthquake at this time. The source of the earthquake is naturally Girls' Generation. Last night, the photo of Lin Yin'er and Kim Taeyin sitting in front of the Shilla Hotel, crying, was taken quite clearly. Then the photo of them getting into a Rolls-Royce was also quite clear. Although the photo of Jiang Hai is not taken clearly, this photo is quite shocking. Although Girls' Generation is not as popular as it was a few years ago, it is still considered a national girl group after all. 2 very famous members getting into a person's car at this time. This, to be honest, it would be strange if it is not shocked. There is no Weibo in South Korea. The main social network is called Sawonet, and there is also Twitter and Facebook, collectively known as SNS. At this time, on SNS, it is extremely shocking. In addition, in the orthodox entertainment news, this news is also constantly attracting the attention of the public. In the midst of this storm, the company that the two of them were in first issued a statement, saying that the two of them appeared at the Shilla Hotel last night, because the two of them were going to star in a show. Because of the resources, they could choose any show they wanted. Then perhaps because they did not have a good relationship, they lost control and cried. The person who drove the car and locked them up is a good friend of the two. If there is any gossip, it would not be so blatant. After reading the management company's words, those who were originally shocked quieted down a little. In the eyes of these people, it is just like what the management company said. If there is really any relationship announcement, it should be with one person, not two people. There are also people who directly think that this might be the management company's hype. Other than these people who know but will not say it, or will not think this way at all, there are also some people who know something but will not say it. For example, Lee Shingji, when he saw the two women at the Shilla Hotel the day before yesterday, his sixth sense told him that he had been cheated on. Therefore, he frantically called Lin Yun'er's phone number, wanting to know why, or he wanted to have a clear answer. Unfortunately, after calling for 2 days, he still could not beat her. When he went to the company to look for her, she was not at the company. When he went to wait for her outside her house, she did not go home. This made him quite angry, but as an artist, he also had his own reasons. Although he felt that his heart was about to explode, he still had to attend an event today. Actually, rather than an event, it would be better to call it a party, because the person who organized this event was the fourth generation of the Lee family. In order to show his positive image, every year, this person would come out to find some celebrities, donate money, do shows and so on. There were no reporters filming, but it would be published in the newspapers. This was also positive news, so he would not let it go. Chapter 840. Hey, Shingji here. Lee Shingji had just arrived at the gathering place in his van, a golf course near Seoul. Many people looked at him, and he quickly sorted out his mood in the car, and then walked out of the car with a smile. As soon as he got out of the car, someone shouted at him. Hearing the owner of this voice, Lee Shingji also looked at the other party, and then the smile on his face became bigger, but there was a trace of disgust in his eyes. He also knew the person who came over. His name is MC Meng. He used to be second to none in South Korea's hip-hop industry, but South Korea had military service. He once escaped the military service, and after he came back, the public didn't buy it very much. So he has always hoped to enter people's eyes through some activities. Lee Shingji and him were related mainly because they were both hosts of 2 Days and 1 Night. But to be honest, the currently popular Lee Shingji didn't really like this older brother of his. But on the surface, they still had to maintain harmony. Brother, you came so early. Looking at MC Meng who came over, Lee Shingji also said politely, Hey, I have nothing to do anyway. So I came over to take a look first, but today there are really a lot of seniors and actors. You can help to introduce them later. Hearing Lee Shingji's words, MC Meng said with a smile. Hearing what he said, although Lee Shingji was smiling on his face, he was sneering in his heart. The two of them slowly walked into the golf club, as if they were really familiar with each other. Lee Shingji couldn't help but nod his head when he saw it. He was indeed worthy of being the legitimate heir of the three-star Lee family. His charisma was far from what ordinary people could compare to. There are a lot of artists who were invited like Lee Shingji. Even Han Jia, who had just given birth a while ago, and had not yet returned, came with her husband. Everyone was wearing golf clothes at this time, and they were chatting. The most dazzling person in the crowd was naturally today's host Lee Jihao. Seeing Lee Shingji coming, Lee Jihao also greeted him with a smile. Shingji is here. Looking at Lee Shingji, Lee Jihao smiled and said, in fact, the relationship between the two was very good. Of course, Lee Shingji didn't have the qualifications to be a good friend of the three-star crown prince. They had a good relationship but no one knew why. Perhaps it was because they hit it off, Or perhaps it was because, after knowing who Li Shengji's girlfriend was, Li Jihao felt that he would definitely make friends with this person. Mr. Li. Hearing his words, Li Shengji immediately said with a smile on his face. MC Meng next to him, after seeing his appearance and Li Jihao, didn't know what to say. After all, he was eager to get close to such a person, but he couldn't say anything to such a person. He could only look at Li Shengji. Li Shengji nodded. However, it was obvious that Li Shengji had no intention of introducing this person to his brother. I saw the news yesterday. Is there anything wrong? Looking at Li Shengji, Li Jihao asked with concern. As for why he cared so much, no one knew. Perhaps it was just a form of concern. There's nothing wrong. I just went to the audition, but the result was not ideal. He naturally knew what Li Jihao was talking about, but now he couldn't say anything else. He could only respond with a smile. Hearing his words, Li Jihao also smiled. However, just as they were about to say something, some people suddenly came in from outside. Seeing these people coming in, many people in the hall looked at them, and the people over there also looked at them. When their eyes met, many people's faces showed a trace of expression, but they concealed it very well. For example, Li Shengji saw two people he was very familiar with among those people, Jiang Hai and Li Shihuai. At the same time in the crowd, Han Jia also saw Jiang Hai and remembered what had happened last night and the night before. Her gaze was somewhat evasive, but she knew that this was not the time to panic. After all, her husband was still by her side, so she forcibly suppressed her desire to avoid his gaze and looked elsewhere. Li Jihao also looked at Jiang Hai, because he also knew Jiang Hai. He didn't know if anyone had any impression of him. Jiang Hai and Li Jihao once had a feud. The reason for their feud was in Atlantic City. When Jiang Hai went to look for Du Feimin happened to be playing cards there. Li Jihao was one of them, and he took a fancy to Pra Walton. Some unpleasant things happened between him and Jiang Hai, but after returning, he was warned not to cause trouble for Jiang Hai. However, at this time, when he saw Jiang Hai here, he couldn't help but squint his eyes, but he soon gave up. It was impossible for him not to know that Jiang Hai was here, and the reason why he didn't dare to do anything was because he knew that he couldn't touch Jiang Hai now. Not to mention him, even his father couldn't touch Jiang Hai, because to some extent, Jiang Hai was now doing business with South Korea. If he made Jiang Hai unhappy, his family would also suffer losses. Therefore, he only glanced at Jiang Hai, then looked away. The people on both sides didn't seem to interfere with each other, and they just brushed past each other. Jiang Hai and Li Shihuai went to the balcony on the second floor together. They were going to rest there. Jiang Hai and the others came early this morning, and they had already played 2 rounds just now. To be honest, Jiang Hai was still fine, but Li Shihuai's physical strength was already a little exhausted. Jiang Hai wasn't particularly interested in this sport, so he suggested that they take a rest, and Li Shihuai naturally wouldn't disagree. This hall was one of the main halls of the golf club. The first floor was the hall, and people took a small battery-powered car to play golf. There was a place on the second floor for people who didn't know how to play, and for the women. Of course, there were also places to rest and eat. Jiang Hai. Looking at Jiang Hai going upstairs, although Li Shengji still had some headaches, he still remembered that he had offended Jiang Hai. Recently, because of his girlfriend's matter, he had forgotten about it. Now that he saw Jiang Hai, he remembered it. Shengji knows that guy. Hearing Li Shengji's words, Li Jihao looked at him with some surprise. Although he and Li Shengji called each other brothers, he didn't think that Li Shengji was at the same level as himself. Although he didn't want to admit it, Jiang Hai was indeed at the same level as himself. Jiang Hai's pasture, beef, and fish were very popular in the world now. As the legitimate son of a Samsung, he was naturally very clear about it. So although he didn't want to admit it, Jiang Hai was indeed at the same level as him. This was not a lie. Oh, I don't know him, it's just... does Mr. Li also know Jiang Hai? Hearing Li Jihao's words, Li Shengji said a little awkwardly. Hearing his words, Li Jihao also smiled. He had nothing to hide. I know that guy, but I have a grudge with that guy. Shrugging, he said to Li Shengji. Hearing what he said, Li Shengji's original intention of asking him for a referral disappeared. If there is a grudge, then it's better not to go over and make things worse. After a bright smile, he didn't say much. But during the break, he can go upstairs and talk to Jiang Hai, hoping that Jiang Hai can let him go. Okay, we should go play golf. Seeing that Li Shengji didn't talk anymore, Li Zhihao also said loudly. Then he clapped his hands, indicating that everyone was ready to go. Of course, they couldn't all go. A golf team will not have more than 4 people. Most of them are 3 or 2. Even if it's not a serious game, the rules still have to be followed. So Li Zhihao only picked 3 people with better skills and some followers to play golf together. Those who were not selected could only go to the 2nd floor. At most, they could only meet the Samsung's son. However, although they didn't have a relationship with Li Zhihao, since they came to play, they had to play. Thus, after going up to the 2nd floor, everyone either gathered together to chat or swung their poles for fun. When these people went upstairs, Jiang Hai in the distance also noticed them. The place where Jiang Hai is now is the place to rest. After they sat down, Jia Lina took the tea leaves and cups that Jiang Hai brought to make tea. He didn't dare to drink anything in South Korea. Who knows if there will be any problems in it? Although it's not that these people in South Korea dared to do such a thing to him. It's better to be vigilant. After Jiang Hai's tea leaves were served, Li Shihuai was also shocked. The ethnic culture of South Korea was inherited from Huaxia. Naturally, they were also very interested in tea. But unfortunately, whether it was South Korea or another country with an inheritance, Japan, they didn't produce much tea. However, Japan played with matcha, so their tea ceremony was still quite famous in the world. As for the South Korea side, they really don't understand tea. However, those officials, especially the high-ranking officials, are bound to be cultured. Just like Li Shihuai, he also drinks tea. However, his tea leaves, which are usually envied by others, are inferior to Jiang Hai's tea. Jiang Hai prefers Westlake Longjing, and these tea leaves were also planted by him. After brewing, the extremely unusual aroma instantly made Li Shihuai lose his composure. Give Minister Li some tea leaves to try. Looking at his appearance, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. He has these things. Chapter 841. When he heard Jiang Hai's words, Li Shengji was dumbfounded. He suddenly thought of a possibility. Xinhua Hotel, his girlfriend, the crying figure that night. When Jiang Hai's car drove away, it was as if all these things had overlapped. When he thought of this, his brain was about to explode. What kind of King melodramatic scene was this? Wasn't this something that only appeared in those bloody NTR stories? Why did it appear in his body? When he thought of this, he felt that his breathing was not very smooth. His vision darkened and he was about to sit down, but fortunately he held on. Now he felt that there was a ball of fire burning in his mouth. His eyes instantly turned red. Now his first thought was to take a knife and cut Jiang Hai and Lin Yun'er. This pair of B** starts. Especially Lin Yun'er. When she was with him, she made all kinds of excuses. What about acting on TV? It didn't count. What about being inexperienced? What about being unfamiliar? These were all nonsense. Could it be that the skills she learned on TV were all given to Jiang Hai? That B** TCH, that B** starred. Li Shengji's whole body was trembling as he recalled Jiang Hai and Lin Yun'er's appearance. It was hard for him to imagine and accept this. He had been cuckolded. Thinking of this, he really had the urge to die. Fortunately, he was a very utilitarian person, and was very open-minded. Li Shengji might not be good at other things, singing, dancing, and acting. After all, you couldn't ask an actor who didn't even have acting skills to sing well, right? But his plan for his life was really good. And it was also very strong. He belonged to the wolf type of person. As long as he was given a chance, he would succeed no matter what. He would not allow Jiang Hai to ruin his career. And that included Lin Yun'er. Therefore, he quickly took 2 deep breaths and suppressed the anger in his heart. He forcibly adjusted his expression and revealed a smile once again. Then, he walked back into the club, but he kept texting Lin Yun'er. Unfortunately, Lin Yun'er did not reply. But this time, he would not give up so easily. In fact, he already knew that Lin Yun'er was at Kim Taeyan's house. The reason why he didn't go to find her was, firstly, to avoid awkwardness, and secondly, to leave some face for both parties. But now he had to go. After Li Jihao returned, he told Li Jihao that he was not feeling well and left. First, he went back to the company to get his car. After putting on a disguise, he drove to Kim Tae-yeon's apartment. For a team like Girls' Generation, they naturally had their own dorm room. But to be honest, after they became popular a few years ago, almost no one lived in a dorm room anymore. After the 9 people became 8 people that year, the dormitory became even more deserted. So basically no one would stay in the dormitory. Unless it was very late at night, and there was no place to stay, the dormitory would always be empty. And the company naturally couldn't take back the dormitory. This was also one of their privileges. Li Xingji drove to a roadside shop and bought some food casually. After eating lunch, Li Xingji drove to the gate of the community where Kim Tae-yeon lived. He waited from noon to night until about 5 o'clock in the evening. When he couldn't wait any longer and was about to knock on Kim Tae-yeon's door, the 2 figures appeared outside the community. Seeing that the 2 had finally appeared, Li Xingji breathed a sigh of relief. He immediately got out of the car and came to the 2. Although the 2 were wrapped tightly and didn't have any makeup on, ordinary passers-by wouldn't be able to recognize them. However, Li Xingji was very familiar with one of them, so he stopped them in front of the 2 in a few steps. "Xingji appa." Seeing the person in front of her, Lin Yuner was stunned for a moment. Then she said somewhat woodenly. Kim Tae-yeon looked at Li Xingji in front of her, but there was a trace of vigilance in her eyes. She knew very well that Li Xingji was very smart and very conceited. He should have guessed most of what happened that day, but she didn't know that he hadn't appeared in the past few days. But now that he appeared, it was destined to not be a good thing. She didn't want Lin Yuner to get hurt again. Yuner. Looking at the 2 in front of him, Li Xingji really didn't know what to say at this time. Looking at the innocent Lin Yuner in front of him, he really wanted to go up and slap her, and then tell her, "You bitch, I already know about your scandal." But he resisted because he knew that if he said that, his career would be over. As long as Lin Yuner didn't appear in front of Jiang Hai tonight, then Jiang Hai would call Li Shihuai, and he would be completely finished. So now he had to beg this woman who made him a cuckold, and beg her to save him. But there was really no way to say these words when they were at the tip of his tongue, especially when there was a woman beside him. "Xingji appa, what's the matter?" Looking at the silent and extremely awkward atmosphere in front of her, Kim Tae-yeon thought for a while and said to Li Xingji. Hearing her words, Li Xingji calmed down a little and smiled at her. "Tae-yeon, can you let me talk to Yuner alone?" Looking at Kim Tae-yeon, Li Xingji asked her. Li Xingji was born in 1987, and Kim Tae-yeon was born in 1989. The 2 also knew each other because of Lin Yuner, so it didn't matter if they called each other by name. Hearing Li Xingji's words, Kim Tae-yeon also looked at Lin Yuner. "Oni, wait for me." Hearing Li Xingji's words, Lin Yuner also calmed down. She had to face this matter eventually. Taking a deep breath, after Lin Yuner persuaded Kim Tae-yeon to leave, she motioned for Li Xingji to go to the side to talk. Then the 2 came to a corner on the side, and Kim Tae-yeon stayed where she was. "Xingji appa, I'm sorry." After walking to the corner, Lin Yuner took a deep breath and spoke first. Indeed, she couldn't stay silent for such a matter. In her opinion, this was her choice. "Hehe Yuner, I understand. This matter is not entirely your responsibility." Lowering his head, Li Xingji suppressed his anger and said to Lin Yuner with a smile on his face. Now he kept telling himself that absolutely he couldn't get angry. "Appa." Hearing Li Xingji's words, Lin Yuner's eyes suddenly turned red, and she looked at Li Xingji gratefully. "You are Jiang Hai." Looking at Lin Yuner's appearance, Li Xingji sighed and then slowly said, "You, how did you know?" Hearing what he said, Lin Yuner was a little confused. It seemed that Li Xingji really knew. "A few days ago, because of a small matter, I accidentally offended him. He wanted to send Li Shihuai to ban me. You know Li Shihuai. He is a high-ranking person in South Korea. He is far from someone a small shrimp like me can afford to offend. So today, I went to beg him, but he told me that if I don't want to be banned, then I have to ask you to go to him." Li Xingji looked at Lin Yun'er. His face was a little ashamed, a little annoyed, and a little embarrassed. In fact, he really wanted to beat Lin Yun'er up and then fight with Jiang Hai. But he knew that he couldn't. He couldn't deny his efforts over the years, just because of these two people. He was already 29 years old this year. He was no longer young. He didn't have so much time to fight, so he had to protect his current achievements. Appa, what do you mean by this? Originally, Lin Yun'er thought that she would get comfort and love from Li Xingji. If he could say something like "let's start over," she would really be moved to death. But this scene was not right. Why did he tell her that Jiang Hai was looking for her? What did this mean? Yun'er, can I trouble you with one thing? Hearing Lin Yun'er's trembling voice, Li Xingji also raised his head and looked at Lin Yun'er as he said slowly. Hearing his words, Lin Yun'er's tears couldn't stop. At night, around 10:30 p.m., Jiang Hai slowly took the elevator back to his floor. The plane tomorrow was ready. Tomorrow, he would go to Huaxia alone, and Cheryl, Azalina, Galina, and Wallace would go back to the United States. Now that the matter in South Korea was over, Jiang Hai naturally had to go back to Huaxia to see Qi Li and the others. The three people there also had to go back to the United States. After Wallace went back, she would continue to control the news. Azalina and Galina had to go back to the manor to protect the safety of the girls. Everything had to be back on track. As for Jiang Hai's own safety, he didn't need to worry about it. Secondly, after he arrived at Huaxia, Du Ning and Qi Li would be there. Thinking of Du Ning and Qi Li, Jiang Hai hadn't seen them for a long time. Last time, Qi Li said that she would go back to find a manager and arrange the company. Then, she went to find Jiang Hai. This time, she was gone for several months, which made Jiang Hai a little depressed. But thinking about it, if she saw Qi Jie and Qi Ya, it seemed that he would be even more depressed, shaking his head. He didn't think about these things for the time being. He forced himself to be spirited, walked to the door of his room, opened the door and walked in. But as soon as he walked in, he found that the atmosphere in the room was a bit wrong. Wallace and Galina, who stayed in the room, were looking at Jiang Hai with a funny face at this time. A figure was sitting on the sofa over there. Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, this figure also stood up and looked directly at Jiang Hai. You really came. That Li Xingji is amazing. He can even invite you over like this. Looking at the woman standing in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled. This Li Xingji is really good. His charm is really great. He can even invite people over like this, but she? Who is she? Chapter 842. Since you're here, let's go in. Looking at Lin Yun'er in front of him, Jiang Hai smiled and walked into his room. Looking at Jiang Hai's actions, Lin Yun'er also sighed. It seemed that tonight, this matter would not end well. But then she laughed at herself. This kind of thing, if it happened once, there would be a second time. And this time, it was the man she thought was the closest to her who pushed her into this pit of fire. Tightening her clothes, Lin Yun'er walked into Jiang Hai's room. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of her, she closed her eyes. I said that I won't force others to do anything. If you don't want to, you can leave at any time. Looking at her, Jiang Hai sat on the ground, looked at her, and said very plainly, I only hope that after tonight, everything will return to its original state. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Lin Yun'er spoke in strange English to Jiang Hai, but her eyes were full of determination. Then she took off her coat in front of Jiang Hai, revealing her perfect figure. As you wish. Looking at Lin Yun'er's serious look, Jiang Hai also smiled and walked over. There was no need to describe in detail what happened after that. That night, Lin Yun'er didn't even know when she fell asleep. But to be honest, apart from the inner entanglement, she was still quite attached to Jiang Hai. That feeling of attacking her soul really made her unable to stop. When she woke up the next day, she was the only one left in the room. The traces of the existence of Jiang Hai and others had disappeared at this time. She only found Jiang Hai's business card beside her. At the same time, there was an address. She understood what Jiang Hai meant. This was to tell her that if there was anything in the future, she could call this number or go to this place. Although she really wanted to throw these two things away, Lin Yun'er somehow stuffed these two things into her clothes. Then, she packed up and left the hotel. Looking at the rare sunlight outside, she didn't know if the matter had come to an end. In fact, it was indeed so. Since Lin Yuner had already come yesterday, Lin Yuner didn't know if it was the end of the matter. Jiang Hai couldn't hold on to an artist. So when he left this morning, he called Li Shihuai and told him that Li Shengji didn't have to target him anymore. It was best to take care of Lin Yuner and Kim Taeyin. In order to thank him for his help, Jiang Hai added 10 tons and 100 tons of fodder to the annual 90 tons of Southern Gaoli. Of course, he didn't add this thing because he had slept with a few girls here. It was because he originally wanted to sell these. This could be considered as taking a step back in order to advance. Unfortunately, the people of Southern Gaoli were still cheering for this. When they arrived at the Incheon airport, Azalina, Galina, Hualizi Cheryl, as well as the staff and 2 bodyguards, boarded the plane that Jiang Hai had specially rented. He was already thinking about whether he should get a plane for himself. But even if he had such thoughts, he would have to wait until he returned to the United States. After watching everyone leave, he bought a first-class ticket and flew directly from Southern Gaoli to the capital of Huaxia. Southern Gaoli wasn't far from Huaxia. At least, it was much closer than flying to the United States. Jiang Hai seemed to have just sat on the plane for a while, and the plane had already informed him that it was about to land. After waiting for a while, the plane landed at the capital airport. Jiang Hai carried his luggage, a backpack, and walked out of the airport's special passage. Jiang Hai didn't like to take too many things with him when he went out. In his backpack, there was only a set of clothes, a few pairs of underwear, and a mobile phone charger. That was all, so a small backpack could fit everything. If he needed something, he would spend money to buy it. In any case, he had plenty of money now. After leaving the capital airport, Jiang Hai took a taxi and went directly to the Chili group. After waiting for a while, Jiang Hai couldn't help but look at this huge building. To be honest, this seemed to be the first time Jiang Hai came to Chili's company. In the past, he had only seen it in some photos at most. Now it seemed that this Chi group was really terrifying. Unlike ordinary companies that rented office buildings, the Chi group itself occupied a huge office building. There was only one company in the whole building, the Chi group. This building was built by Chi Li's father. The location was a little remote, not in the second ring road, but on the side of the third ring road. When building this building, the Chi group spent a lot of money to approve the land and construction. This was also the building of the Chi group at its peak. This building was worth 10 billion yuan, of course, in RMB. Although this building wasn't very tall, it was really a feeling to see such a building here. After getting out of the car, Jiang Hai looked at the huge building in front of him and clicked his tongue. Thinking about himself in the past, it seemed that he really didn't match Chi Li very well. But now Jiang Hai could afford such a building. After sorting out his backpack, Jiang Hai walked towards the Chi group building in front of him and came to the front desk. At this time, no one knew who Jiang Hai was, so basically everyone turned a blind eye to Jiang Hai. "Hello, how can I help you?" Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, a beautiful girl at the front desk here asked Jiang Hai with some doubts. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also came over. "Sorry to trouble you, I'm looking for Chi Li." Looking at the girl, Jiang Hai said to her with a smile, "Looking for President Chi? Do you have an appointment?" Hearing that Jiang Hai was looking for Chi Li, the receptionist here was stunned for a moment, then asked Jiang Hai with some doubts. With her memory, she didn't seem to have seen Jiang Hai before. "No, I'll have to trouble you to make a phone call. My name is Jiang Hai." Hearing the receptionist's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said to her. Maybe because Jiang Hai's attitude was good, the receptionist didn't avoid Jiang Hai and directly called Chi Li's office with an internal phone. Since Zheng Jin left, Chi Li's assistants became 2. One is Du Ning, and the other is a promoted person. But whether it is Du Ning or this person, they all know Jiang Hai. After learning that Jiang Hai came, Du Ning immediately told the news to Chi Li. "Jiang Hai is here?" A few days ago, Jiang Hai said that he would come to see her, but he didn't say the specific time. Now that he suddenly appeared in the building, even Chi Li was stunned. Then a smile quickly flashed on her face. She stopped reading the documents and jumped out of the office. She took her exclusive elevator and went directly to the first floor. After getting off the elevator, she saw Jiang Hai standing not far from the front desk, playing with his mobile phone. She couldn't help but speed up her pace. Before Jiang Hai could react, a pair of small hands covered Jiang Hai's eyes. "Guess who I am?" Looking at Jiang Hai, who was stunned for a moment, Qili deliberately changed her voice and asked Jiang Hai, who else can it be, Qili?" Hearing Qili's words, Jiang Hai was also stunned for a moment. If he was a veteran in love now, he would definitely tease Qili, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai really didn't feel anything about this. So he just said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's unromantic words, Qili still didn't care, and let go of her hand with a smile. Then with a smile on her face, she hugged Jiang Hai happily, and Jiang Hai turned around and touched her hair. Seeing the scene in front of them, to be honest, the glasses of the whole company almost fell off. Qili had always been known as the cold-faced queen in the company. She had the capital to be arrogant, young, beautiful, and powerful. If she wasn't arrogant, who would be arrogant? But such a queen-like woman was quite popular with modern men. Although they heard that Qili was married, few people in the company had seen Jiang Hai. So many of them secretly fantasized about Qili. But now, Jiang Hai and Qili's actions had completely oppressed these people. Regardless of whether they were men or women, they were all stunned at this time. The men came because their dreams were broken, and the women were simply surprised because they had never seen such a smiling Qili. At the same time, they also became interested in this man, who could make Qili put down her pride. At this time, Qili only had eyes for Jiang Hai. She didn't care about showing affection to Jiang Hai in front of others. "Why didn't you tell me you were back? I could have picked you up. Let's go upstairs and rest first." Qili naturally held Jiang Hai's arm and walked with Jiang Hai to the elevator in the distance. When she walked, she almost put all her weight on Jiang Hai. In other people's words, she seemed to be glued to Jiang Hai. The queen they liked in the past showed another side of herself at this time, an even more charming side, but unfortunately, it was not for them. "I want to give you a surprise." Hearing Qili's words, Jiang Hai also smiled, and then followed her into the elevator. As the elevator door closed, the people outside were still speechless for a long time. It was because today's scene had shocked them too much. But in the company, many WeChat groups and QQ groups exploded not long after. For the Qi family, this was a big event. However, while everyone was concerned about the gossip and the real identity of Jiang Hai, some people who already knew who Jiang Hai was frowned, because for them, Jiang Hai's high-profile visit to the Qi family this time was still unknown whether it was a blessing or a curse. Chapter 843. Is it delicious? Looking at Jiang Hai, who was eating happily in front of her, Qili sat opposite him and said with a smile, "Well, not bad, don't you want to eat?" Looking at Qili, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. At the same time, he picked up the rolling donkey in front of him and continued to tear it. To be honest, he likes these soft and sticky foods very much. "I want you to feed me." Looking at Jiang Hai, Qili still said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled, then handed the rolling donkey in front of him with his hand, and said to her, "Well, I want you to feed me with your mouth." Seeing Jiang Hai's action, Qili pouted and shook her head, then blinked a pair of big eyes, and said to Jiang Hai very cutely. Hearing her request, Jiang Hai glanced to the side. After finding that there was indeed no one, he sent the rolling donkey over. Qili also opened her mouth and held the rolling donkey, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she kissed Jiang Hai's mouth directly. Her tongue instantly took the initiative to attack Jiang Hai. Feeling the strength of her attack, Jiang Hai didn't mean to let her go. He stretched his arm and directly pulled her from the seat in front of him and let her sit on his lap. Then the two's lips met and kissed passionately. It wasn't until nearly 5 minutes later that Qili took the initiative to leave, because she was a little out of breath. While chewing the rolling donkey in her mouth, she looked at Jiang Hai with a smile, and at the same time, her hand was constantly exploring Jiang Hai's lower part. It can be seen that she has been holding it in these days. After confirming that there was no one else in this office and outsiders couldn't see, Jiang Hai's hand was not so honest. To be honest, Qi in front of him is still very tempting. After Jiang Hai and Qi went upstairs just now, Qi originally asked Jiang Hai to wait for a while. After she finished her business, she would take Jiang Hai home. But maybe it was because she took too long, and Jiang Hai happened to find a box of rolling donkey, so he sat here and ate it. Then after Qi finished her business, she came to flirt with Jiang Hai. Just as the atmosphere between the two gradually heated up, suddenly a knock on the door sounded from outside. After hearing the knock on the door, Jiang Hai and Qi bodies shook, and then they couldn't help but look at each other. "We will go home later." Patting Jiang Hai's chest, Qi whispered, then stood up, tidied up her clothes and asked the person outside, "What's the matter?" Hearing that Qi returned to the state of an iceberg, Jiang Hai also sat on the sofa again and ate the rolling donkey in front of him. Hearing Qi words, the person outside the door also replied, "President Qi, the elder and the third elder are here." Listening to Qi words, Du Ning's voice also came from outside the door. Hearing Du Ning's voice, Jiang Hai and Qi were stunned. "What are they doing here?" Hearing Du Ning's words, Qi thought for a moment, then said to Du Ning outside the door, "Let them come in." Then she gave Jiang Hai a look, telling Jiang Hai to watch out for a while. Then, she walked back to her seat and pretended to check documents. Not long after she sat down, the door of the office opened, and 5 people came in from outside. Jiang Hai knew these 5 people. The leader was Qi, who was known as Qi Song's elder. But in fact, he wasn't her biological elder. He could only be regarded as the elder of the family. Behind him was Qi Yuanlong, Qi third uncle, who was also a lazy guy. Behind the two of them were their sons, Qi Liangkai and Qi Zhengtao. At the end of the line was Qi Zhengtao's wife, who could be considered the only one in Qi Yuanlong's family who was more business-minded. Her name was Lu Si. Jiang Hai had seen these people before during the Chinese New Year. At that time, Qi Song's family had leaned towards the Yin family. He didn't know what these guys were doing here. Thinking of this, his hand, which was originally holding the food, relaxed. He just sat on the sofa and looked at these people in front of him. When these people came in, they also saw Jiang Hai and Qi at a glance. The older you get, the more unruly you become. Seeing that they had come in, Qi and Jiang Hai didn't even move. Qi Song's face was a little ugly. He usually liked to take advantage of his seniority and didn't do anything. But he still wanted others to respect him. "Shaoli, your uncle is here. Why aren't you greeting him?" Hearing Qi Song's unhappy words, Qi Yuanlong chuckled. Hearing what he said, Qi face showed a trace of disdain and a sneer. "Uncle, third uncle, you don't come without a reason. If you have something to say, just say it. Your niece is still very busy here." Qi looked at the 2 people in front of her with a hand supporting her chin. She didn't speak and said calmly, "You. Okay, then let's talk about business. I came this time to see Jiang Hai. After all, we haven't seen each other for a long time. Secondly, I just want to ask you why Liang Kai's proposal was stopped." Seeing that Qi in front of him didn't want to talk to him, Qi Song almost went berserk. He remembered his purpose, suppressed the thoughts in his heart, and then said to Qi. Hearing what he said, Qi couldn't help but chuckle. "Thank you for your concern, uncle." Hearing Qi words, Jiang Hai also smiled and nodded. He naturally knew about the Qi family's affairs. If Qi father was still here, then they would pay attention to some etiquette. Now that Qi father was not here, Jiang Hai didn't have the intention to talk about these things. He just sat there and nodded. "Now that you have seen Jiang Hai, I will answer your second question. Why did we stop Brother Liang Kai's proposal? It is because we don't have the ability to implement it at all." Looking at Qi Song in front of her, Qi said to him very seriously, "Why can't it be implemented? Why can't it be implemented? I have already talked to the customs. It is completely possible to bring in live animals. Why can't it be implemented?" Looking at Qi in front of him, Qi Liangkai also stood out from the crowd and said with a face full of anger. In his view, Qi was completely against him. Why can't it be implemented? Why can't it be implemented? Because you can't get that cow. Looking at Qi Liangsai's appearance, Qi Li chuckled, and then glanced at Jiang Hai. When Jiang Hai heard them talking about live animals and cows, his sixth sense told him that it might be related to him. Why can't you get it? You can get it. This is our Qi family's business, not our family's business. You also have to do something. Seeing that Qi Li in front of him directly rejected his proposal, Qi Liangkai couldn't help but glare at Qi Li and say, "Sorry, this is not the place for you to shout. Besides, I don't quite understand what you are talking about." Hearing Qi Liangkai shouting at Qi Li, Jiang Hai frowned, and then stood up. He slowly walked behind Qi Li, and said to the people in front of him, he was a person who cared about his reputation the most. When he and Qi Li didn't have a good relationship before, he wouldn't allow anyone to shout at his nominal woman in front of him. Now that their relationship had made some progress, it was even more impossible for him to do so. Feeling Jiang Hai's action, Qi Li couldn't help but smile. Her hand unconsciously held Jiang Hai's hand. "What does this have to do with you? Why are you interrupting?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Jingtao couldn't help but say, he had to admit that this guy was here to be cannon fodder. Didn't he see that the others didn't say anything? However, although these people didn't want to be cannon fodder, it wasn't bad to let him say this sentence. According to Qi Song and the others, Qi Jingtao's role was just this, nothing more. This matter really has something to do with him, because the cow you are staring at is his. Patting the back of Jiang Hai's hand, Qi Li smiled and said to the people in front of her. Hearing Qi Li's words, the people in front of her couldn't help but be stunned. Qi Jingtao's face was full of embarrassment. Qi Liangsai's eyes kept rolling. Qi Song's face was a little gloomy, and Qi Yuanlong was a little speechless. LVC, who was following behind, still had her head lowered, not letting others see the expression on her face. "Oh, are you talking about my cow?" Hearing Qi Li's words and looking at the expressions of the people in front of him, Jiang Hai was also stunned. After talking for so long, they were talking about his cow, but what was there to talk about? Brother Liang Kai and Brother Zhengtao saw that our restaurant's beef was selling well, so they wanted to get involved. But the restaurant's shares are 100% owned by the two of us, and we are not going to go public, nor are we going to raise capital. So I didn't want them to get involved. So they proposed that the beef in our restaurant could be provided by them. But they couldn't meet the quality of the beef in our restaurant. So they wanted to import your cow and raise it in China. I heard that it has already been arranged. What do you think? Seeing that Jiang Hai understood, Qi Li couldn't help but smile. And then she said to Jiang Hai. Listening to Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Originally he was still puzzled. Didn't Qi Li say that she would go to the United States to look for him, after she came back to deal with some things? Why did she come back for so long, and have no intention of going back? At first, he thought that she was held back by something, but now it seemed that it was this matter. Since these cows are brother-in-laws, then everything is easy. Brother-in-law, I have already arranged for the customs. Your cows can be directly transported into the customs alive. We are all relatives. You eat the meat, and we also have to drink the soup, right? I think brother-in-law shouldn't refuse. Since they had found the supplier, Qi Liangkai and the others looked at Jiang Hai. Among them, Qi Liangkai also looked at Jiang Hai seriously and said to him. His words really didn't treat himself as an outsider. He 3 words. Hearing Qi Liangsai's words in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled and raised 3 fingers. No problem? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Liangsai's face flashed with a look of excitement. It can't be done. But unfortunately, Jiang Hai's answer instantly suppressed this excitement. Chapter 844. Bastard, you tricked me. Hearing Zhang's words, Qi Liangkai reacted and roared angrily. Oh, not bad, your IQ has increased. You even know that I'm tricking you. Looking at Qi Liangkai in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Liangsai's eyes were about to burst into flames. If Jiang Hai wasn't teasing him, but Qi Jingtao, that guy would have already rushed over and let Jiang Hai beat him up. At present, there weren't many people who could beat Jiang Hai, but Qi Liangkai was used to being gloomy, so he wasn't so impulsive. Jiang Hai, what do you mean? Stopping his son, Chi Song said angrily to Jiang Hai. What do I mean? The literal meaning. With a shrug, Jiang Hai said calmly. Did we father and son offend you? Looking at Jiang Hai, Chi Song said with a puzzled face. He did not remember this. Hee, you are really forgetful. Who was the one who relied on the Yin family, and then went to my mother-in-law's house to abuse their power? Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. So in their eyes, that was not considered offending? Indeed, the dirtiest things in the world were politics and business. There was a saying in the business circle that there were no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. Since ancient times, Huaxia had emphasized scholars, farmers, and businessmen. Why did they rank the businessmen, who were highly respected by foreigners, so low? It was because most businessmen had no bottom line. In order to make money, they would do anything. The day before yesterday, they were irreconcilable enemies. Today, they could be good friends who drank and chatted happily. The day after tomorrow, they could kill the whole family because of a small matter. This was the businessman. Businessmen valued profits and despised righteousness. This was the exact opposite of Huaxia's policy since ancient times. Just like Chi Song's current state. He didn't think that what he did back then was wrong. He even asked Jiang Hai how there was a gap between them. Didn't he know that there was a huge gap between them? Speaking of which, the only person in this room who was not a businessman was Jiang Hai. In the past, Qili had always been a pure businesswoman. But now that she was focused on Jiang Hai, she was a little better. We did that for the sake of the Qi clan. I don't think we made the wrong choice back then. It's easier to make enemies than enemies. It's better to have one more friend than one more enemy. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chi Song thought for a moment, but the arrogance on his face was still very calm. That selfless face made Jiang Hai really want to go up and give him a kick. He just didn't know if this old guy could withstand Jiang Hai's kick, so Jiang Hai suppressed this idea. That depends on whether this person is worth making friends with. Your businessman's face has nothing to do with me. In my opinion, since you're an enemy, then you should be prepared to fight to the death. Since you decided to be a traitor and seek refuge with the Yin clan, whether you die or not now has nothing to do with me. Even if you talk nonsense, my attitude will still be the same. Hearing Chi Song's words, Jiang Hai said quite disdainfully. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, 4 of the 5 people's faces changed dramatically. Now Jiang Hai's words were very clear. He was now enemies with these people. He had already given them face by not beating them directly. How could they still want his cow? Haha, daydreaming. You bastard, what are you talking about? Do you think you're awesome just because you raised 2 broken cows? Today, I'll let you see what your grandpa cheese means is. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the others could bear it, but Qi Jingtao couldn't. As soon as Jiang Hai's voice fell, he directly walked out of the crowd. With a glare and a frown, he was ready to discuss with Jiang Hai. Of course, he was going to discuss with his fists. Jiang Hai was also looking at him with a smile. As long as he dared to show off, Jiang Hai would teach him a good lesson and let him know that he couldn't afford to provoke just anyone. As for the 2 old men, Jiang Hai couldn't make a move, because if he didn't control his strength, it would be troublesome if he killed them. But this Qi Jingtao, haha, Jiang Hai wouldn't be soft-hearted so easily. Qili, do you have the same intention? However, at this time, Qi Song stretched out his hand and stopped Qi Yuantao. Then he stared at Qi Li and said slowly. Before this, their purpose was indeed to bring in Qi Li's restaurant's cows. Then, they would raise them themselves. In their eyes, the profits from the beef were really small. Unfortunately, they had looked for Qi Li many times, but Qi Li didn't give them a direct answer. They also encouraged the other shareholders in the company many times. They pressured Qi Li to merge the 4 restaurants into the Qi family. However, Qi Li had been holding back and didn't agree. She also didn't confront these people directly. This time, when Jiang Hai came back, they originally thought that it was Qi Li who asked Jiang Hai to come back to help her. But they didn't expect this guy to be the owner of those cows. No wonder Qi Li didn't allow anyone to touch those 4 restaurants. It turned out that they were the husband and wife's businesses. This adulterous couple. In the eyes of these people, if they didn't bring them in to make money, It was almost as if they wanted to kill them. Kinship didn't exist here. And Jiang Hai also saw through this point, so he refused very straightforwardly. At the same time, don't forget that Jiang Hai's cows were protected by the American government. At the same time, they were also protected by Jiang Hai. It was impossible to keep them alive, because there was no option at all. Jiang Hai is my husband. Since I'm married to him, I naturally have to follow his lead. Whatever he says, it's what it is. Hearing Qi Song's words, Qi Li also chuckled, and then said slowly. Hearing Qi Li's words, Qi Song and the others' faces were really dark to a certain extent. Since they knew that it was useless to say anything here, Qi Song also waved his hand, turned around, and walked out of the office. After they left, Jiang Hai's brows also frowned slightly. Dad, are we just going to let this matter go? I have already told young Master Zhang. This matter is in the bag. He has also helped to settle the customs. But now Jiang Hai suddenly intervened. Our plans are all messed up. After walking out of the office, Qi Liang hesitated and said to Qi Song. They wanted Jiang Hai's cows. But it wasn't as simple as it seemed on the surface. This matter isn't over so easily. We have to find a way to make them talk. Let's go. Narrowing his eyes, Qi Song snorted coldly, and then slowly walked forward. The others had to endure now, but Qi Yuantao didn't think so. Dad, uncle, you guys go down first. I'm going to the bathroom. When they reached the floor of their office, Qi Jingtao, who was walking together, suddenly said at this time, then turned around and ran to the other side. Little C, watch this guy. Don't make trouble for my people. Seeing his actions, the other three men couldn't help but frown. Then Qi Yuanlong thought for a moment, and said to Qi Jingtao's wife, Lucy. Lucy's father was a general manager of a subsidiary company of the Qi Group. He had a good talent in business, and his daughter Lucy was also quiet and had a high education. After entering the Qi Group, she also showed some talent. Just when everyone felt that like father like daughter, she actually married Qi Jingtao. Many people lamented that it was really a flower inserted in cow dung. However, after only a year of marriage, this voice disappeared because unknowingly, Lucy had become the spokesperson of Qi Yuanlong's family in the company. Qi Yuanlong and Qi Jingtao didn't have any business talent. Qi Yuanlong just hung the name of a director, and Qi Jingtao hung the name of a deputy minister. But it was useless. They didn't have any real power. The only people they could control were their secretaries and drivers. But these two people were still paid by the group. It could be said that they didn't care at all. On the other hand, Lucy became a department head of the group. Although she wasn't a manager, she had real power in her hands. Her influence might be greater than her father's. Yes, I will keep an eye on him. Hearing the words of the old man, Lucy also nodded and said respectfully. But they didn't know that while they were talking, Qi Jingtao had already taken the elevator to the security department. No matter which company's security department it was, there would always be some people who mingled in the underworld. They didn't expect them to patrol, nor did they expect them to be in charge, but they were paid much more than ordinary security guards. The purpose was to let them deter some of the punks in the underworld, so that these guys wouldn't dare to come and scam. After all, although they were related to the Qi Group, it was impossible to be moved by every little thing. Naturally, the Qi Group also raised a few such people. Qi Zhengtao relied on the reputation of his company's direct descendant. Although he didn't mix well with the regular employees, he had some reputation among these people. When he walked into the security lounge, he saw 4 or 5 people in the distance. They were wearing security uniforms, sitting there smoking and playing cards. The company clearly stated that smoking was not allowed, but for these people, this rule was not established. When these people saw Qi Jingtao coming, they immediately stood up with a smile. "Oh, Master Qi, you are here. Do you want to play?" Looking at Qi Jingtao, the security guard here said with a smile, "You are not at the level." Qi Jingtao said disdainfully as he looked at these people throwing dozens and hundreds of cards on the bench. Yes. How can our level be enough for you to play? We're just killing time." Hearing what Qi Jingtao said, these people didn't care. Instead, they laughed and said, "Don't talk nonsense. My wife will come to me in a while. Today, I am looking for you because I have something to trouble you with. Hearing their compliments, Qi Jingtao also waved his hand, then looked at these people in front of him and said seriously. Chapter 845. I was wondering why there was no news from you after you came back to the capital. It seems that you are in trouble? After these people left, Jiang Hai patted Qi Li's head in front of him and said indifferently under her reproachful gaze. Oh yeah, I didn't tell you because I didn't want to distract you, but now it seems that it's better to tell you earlier. Qi Li shrugged her shoulders and said in a somewhat speechless manner. Indeed, this was a matter that gave her a headache. What the hell is going on, tell me? Pulling Qi Li up directly, Jiang Hai sat on her boss chair, then put her on his lap and asked Qi Li. With Qi Li's level she should come. The main thing is like this. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also organized her words and said slowly. The main problem was still Jiang Hai and Qi Li's restaurant. At the beginning, Qi Li went to the United States to find Jiang Hai to talk about their relationship, but she happened to meet Prawalton. At that time, Qi Li knew that Jiang Hai was no longer her burden. She couldn't be blamed for being realistic. In fact, the relationship between a man and a woman at home was proportional to their economic status. Since ancient times, Huaxia had always been a patriarchal society. Of course, in many areas, the husband's authority was not respected. But if a woman was asked to find a man who was much worse than her, she might not be willing at first. Even if they were together, this woman would definitely be the head of the family. In terms of age, one was as beautiful as a flower, the other was ordinary, one was rich, and the other was poor. If Qi Li were to choose, she would never like Jiang Hai. This was inevitable. This was also one of the reasons why she hadn't paid much attention to Jiang Hai in the past year of their marriage. This wasn't to clear her name, but to illustrate the reality. Even in an average family, if the man earned 2,000 yuan a month, and the woman earned 30,000 yuan a month, then in this family, the woman's words would have the final say, because the man had to rely on the woman to survive. This was reality. On the other hand, Jiang Hai wasn't willing to give up his dignity. Secondly, he wasn't willing to try to change. He wasn't an ambitious person. Therefore, it was no wonder that Qi Li looked down on him. This was indeed a very sad thing. However, after Qi Li went to the United States, she suddenly found that Jiang Hai was not as free as she thought. There was an old saying that gold would always be spent. Oh, it would shine. Jiang Hai's actions in the United States were shining in her eyes. In the past, it wasn't that Jiang Hai didn't have any ability. It was just that his nature was like this. He liked the idea of playing with the world, because facts speak louder than words. Jiang Hai's ability was displayed in the United States. But if Jiang Hai knew that she had such thoughts, Jiang Hai would probably laugh. But no matter what, Qi Li changed a little after that day, especially when Jiang Hai saved her from the mouth of the mountain lion. From that day onwards, she wanted to know more about Jiang Hai. She had to admit that sometimes people were cheap. In the past, when Jiang Hai was guarding her all day, she did not even look at Jiang Hai. Now that she was interested in Jiang Hai, she began to inquire about Jiang Hai's news, wanting to know his movements. In addition to the later contact, she was sure that she seemed to have unknowingly fallen in love with Jiang Hai. But this love came too late. Jiang Hai was already surrounded by a large number of women. It had to be said that people never know how their lives will be. No matter how you plan, there will always be a time when you go astray. If it was 5 years ago, if someone told Qi Li that she would marry an average-looking, greedy, lustful man who was surrounded by more than a dozen women, she would probably take her limited edition Emax bag and smash it directly on the person's face. But 5 years later, this was the reality. It was as simple as that, so simple that she was a little caught off guard. Well, the topic went astray. This time, the crisis mainly came from Jiang Hai's beef. In order to have more contact with Jiang Hai, Qi Li opened 4 steak restaurants in the capital. She introduced Jiang Hai's beef, and then began to sell it. There was no other business secret, no advertising, and no promotion, because this was prepared for the top people in the capital. The sales cost really had nothing to do with the wage earners. If they could not afford the sales cost, then don't come. It was a very simple reason. As the restaurants became popular, more things happened. Huaxia people were the second smartest people in the world, especially when it came to doing business. They might not be as good as the Jews who were born to do business, but they were very sensitive to business. After seeing that these 4 restaurants were making money, many people were tempted to invest in them. Some people wanted to come over and take a share, but they were stopped by Qili. What a joke! The Qi family was not the top super family in the capital, but it was at the bottom of the first class and the top of the second class. The company had been worth close to 20 billion, but with the addition of the 4 restaurants, it was worth more than 60 billion, which was $10 billion in total. Although it was still far from being comparable to the mega corporations, it was still a terrifying amount. No one could easily touch such a behemoth or cut off a piece of meat from it. In particular, the Qi family seemed to have some connections in the Middle East, which made the people in the top management even more afraid to act rashly. Since the people in the top management did not dare to make a move, the people in the bottom management naturally did not dare to make a move. Since they could not get the restaurants, they began to think about the raw materials. Many people who had some connections came to Qili. They hoped that they could obtain the right to supply the beef. However, when Qili just put the beef there, these people left. It was not because of any reason, but because they couldn't compete with her. However, it was precisely because of this that more people paid attention to the beef here. But this time, they were not concerned about the supply rights or the shares of the restaurants, but about the cattle. It was impossible to do it openly, so Qili and the others who coveted the restaurants surrendered without integrity this time, and became the vanguard of these people. They came over because they wanted Qili to bring in some live cattle and breed them. In a small way, these cattle would be money in the future. In a big way, it was called improving the domestic cattle breed, which was beneficial to the country and the people. However, in the face of such a big accusation, Zhang Hai only wanted to raise a middle finger and tell them that it was none of their business. Hee, these people in the country are really interesting. Touching his nose, Zhang Hai laughed. It seemed that his choice to go to the United States was very wise. Otherwise, in the country, his manor, farm, and so on would have been occupied by some so-called government officials. A department-level cadre was probably enough to ruin his family. If they got the cattle but didn't study it, they would occupy his pasture. If the pasture was not studied, they would probably study him. At that time, not only would his family be ruined, but he would also die. This was inevitable. Of course, this couldn't be said that Zhang Hai was too pessimistic. No matter what, he had to prepare for the worst, right? Compared to the country, the United States was not much better. If Zhang Hai went to the United States at the beginning and showed his strong side, he would probably be eliminated by those people in the United States in an instant. But now it was already the 3rd year. It was not an exaggeration to describe his power in the United States as intertwined. The biggest difference between the United States and Huaxia was that the world was based on the gold standard. As a taxpayer, Zhang Hai would become the most powerful person in the privileged class in the United States, as long as he did not go against the United States government in terms of principles. But in the country, as long as he did not become an official, he would never become a person of the privileged class. He was really too lazy to deal with the deceit of the officialdom. One wrong step there, and he would be doomed eternally. Are you sure about who is behind those people? Listening to Qili's words, Zhang Hai also understood that Qi Song and the others were actually just some subordinates. The people who really wanted to touch his piece of meat should be the people at the top. A second-tier big shot's grandson, but I haven't determined who it is. The other party is very secretive, but don't worry. What you have to do now is to expand your influence in the United States as much as possible. As long as your influence is greater, then these people won't dare to do anything to me. And even if they do, I can still go to the United States to find you. What if we emigrate? Qili shrugged. She didn't care too much about this. To be honest, she was very interested in the brand of the Qi Group. She couldn't just watch this company collapse. so she had been keeping an eye on it. However, if it really came to the point where she had to become an enemy of Huaxia, then she would not hesitate to give up here. Just as Qili said, Jiang Hai's place was her escape route. Similarly, her place was also Jiang Hai's escape route. It's really troublesome. Like I said, what I hate the most is these twists and turns. Are you done dealing with things? Let's go home. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai said as if he had given up. He really hated these things. He was not the kind of person who took pleasure in guessing other people's thoughts. He did not like to take risks. He preferred to crush. It was as simple as that. Okay, you go downstairs and wait for me. I'm going to ask the heads of those departments to come up and take these documents away. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qili's little face couldn't help but blush. Go home. What do you want to do when you go home? That doesn't need to be said. However, she wouldn't object to this. She gave Jiang Hai's chest a punch and said in a low voice. Chapter 846. After leaving Qili's office, Jiang Hai also greeted Du Ning. Du Ning was Azalina's colleague, whom Jiang Hai rescued from Ukraine. To be honest, Jiang Hai really felt that these girls were very useful. Reconnaissance, spying, force protection, and so on were all quite good. And because they had to do undercover missions before, they all had a good memory and could find their positions in an instant. According to the saying in the acting circle, they were like whatever role they played. When they were undercover to kill people, even if there was a slight mistake, they would die because of it. People who had grown to their level were already able to adapt to all roles. Although Du Ning had never been a secretary or assistant before, after half a month of internship here, she had basically mastered it. Now she was already Qili's helper. Although she still couldn't provide her own opinions to Qili like Zheng Jin in the past, she didn't expect her to do this, right? Now she lived with Qili, and some friendship between the two women had unknowingly developed. This was what Jiang Hai wanted to see the most. After telling Du Ning to leave the door open at night, Jiang Hai went to the first floor under Du Ning's blushing face, and then walked directly to the door on the first floor. Although the outside of the imperial capital was now full of smoke, he still liked to stay outside, more than staying at home. But there was a saying that it was easy to come in, but difficult to go out. When he came in, no one came to trouble Jiang Hai, but when he went out, several security guards suddenly stopped Jiang Hai. Looking at their appearance, Jiang Hai frowned, but thinking that these people were also Qili's employees, Jiang Hai suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart and looked at them. What's the matter? Looking at these people in front of him, Jiang Hai said to them. Although these people in front of him were wearing security uniforms, he knew at a glance that they were not good people. What's the matter? Don't you know what it is? Take it out. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the security guards here looked at Jiang Hai and looked up and down. His figure was quite tall and not small, but they had seen many people like him before. So these people had no fear at all. Instead, they came forward and said to Jiang Hai, "Things? What things?" Hearing what they said, Jiang Hai frowned. What are these guys talking about? Why can't I understand? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the security guard couldn't help but smile. He wanted Jiang Hai to ask this question. What things? You still have the nerve to ask me. Take out the things you stole immediately. Hearing the security guard raise his voice by 2 octaves, the people who were nearby were stunned, and then looked at Jiang Hai. Many of these people knew Jiang Hai. After all, Qili's attitude towards Jiang Hai just now was not a secret in the company. Those green-skinned ruffians and the like might just look fierce, but in fact, they weren't very strong physically. Although these gangsters used to be gangsters, after all, they changed after they had some reputation. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here as security guards. Their biggest role was to shock those gangsters. Sometimes reputation might not be useful for gangsters. Compared to reputation, combat strength was also a measure. Therefore, these gangsters were still in good physical condition. Although they smoked and drank, they were not small in size. But compared with Jiang Hai, it was useless no matter how strong they were. His physical fitness was 8 times the limit of an ordinary human. How could these guys compare with him? He went up and gave them a series of kicks, sending all of them flying. Of course, he didn't kill them. He didn't say that he would kick these guys to death, but this kick would definitely make them feel pain. What are you still watching there for? Come and help. After most of the security guards flew out, they just covered their mouths and screamed. The leader's physical fitness might be better, so while covering his mouth, he also shouted at the security guards standing outside the door, and the people around him who were watching the fun. Hearing his words, these people looked at each other. Some of them had a little hesitation in their eyes, but most of them took a step back. Jiang Hai didn't make trouble here. They came here to work, not to fight. If they hurt someone, or if Jiang Hai hurt them, then the loss outweighed the gain. These white-collar workers weren't gangsters. They didn't have the courage to go up. In their view, their job was very important. After all, if there was any accident and their job was lost, who could they find to reason with? The ordinary security guards outside were actually some good people. If they had that kind of ruthlessness, why didn't they go out to gangsters at such a young age? So for a while, under the roar of the leader, no one stood up. What's wrong? What happened here? But at this moment, Qi Jingtao's voice came from a distance. Then he was seen holding a glass of water and slowly walking over. He had been paying attention to the situation here for a long time. After all, these people were hired by him to beat up Jiang Hai. Hearing that there was no sound here, he was also afraid that there would be an accident. In his impression, Jiang Hai was still the young man with a face mask when he attended the wedding. It was best to let these gangsters teach Jiang Hai a lesson, but if they beat up Jiang Hai, then it would be troublesome. Jiang Hai was Qi Li's husband, although he thought that he was invincible and the best in the world. To be honest, he was still a little afraid of Qi Li. If Qi Li fought to the death with them for Jiang Hai, then he would have to use some means. Well, who knew where his confidence came from? If Qi Li used the same method to deal with Qi Liangkai to deal with Qi Jingtao, then he would probably be squatting in some prison, crying tears behind bars. This idiot had a lot of dirt on him, but Qi Li was too lazy to pay attention to him. However, when he came over and looked at the situation on the field, he was a little confused. In his opinion, Jiang Hai should be lying on the ground with a bloody nose and a swollen face. But at this time, he was standing in the same place with a calm face, while the people he found were lying on the ground moaning. Young Master Qi, this guy stole something. We wanted to search him, but he didn't cooperate and even injured our people. Looking at Qi Jingtao, who was in a daze, the leader reacted quickly and shouted at the top of his voice. Hearing his words, Qi Jingtao's brain quickly turned. Although he was quite stupid, he still had a mysterious self-confidence. But he had been in the business world for many years, and he had seen some methods that he had not learned before, such as slandering. Jiang Hai, what do you mean by this? Don't think that you can do whatever you want in the Qi group, just because you have Qi Li's support. Chapter 847. Does this count as doing whatever I want? You haven't seen what I do even more. This is the lobby. I can be sure that there are surveillance cameras. Whether I do whatever I want or not, you'll know once you check it out. He looked at Qi Jingtao with disdain. Was there something wrong with this guy's brain? If he didn't jump out now, Jiang Hai wouldn't be here to interrogate these people about who was behind the scenes, and he wouldn't be able to make things difficult for them on the spot. Now, anyone with a functioning brain would understand. If he didn't beat up Jiang Hai, he could just close his eyes. However, this guy didn't want to. He had to jump out. If he wasn't courting death, what was he doing? In the past, Jiang Hai had always thought that those brainless second generations only existed in novels or TV dramas. Because in the real world, such people might have died long ago. But now, he found that reality was always more fascinating than novels and TV dramas, because this world really didn't lack idiots. Qi Jingtao in front of him was definitely a teenager with a mental problem. Bullshit surveillance. If I say it's your fault, then it's your fault. What are you talking about? You guys arrest him. Sure enough, after listening to Jiang Hai's words, this Qi Jingtao was like a character in some melodramatic TV dramas. He panicked a little in an instant, but he didn't run away. Instead, he stood in place and shouted loudly. It was almost as if he was saying that he was the sky, and the law of the Qi group. Hearing his words, the people next to him moved further away. Now almost all the people in the company knew that the Qi group was divided into two forces. The first one, which was also the most powerful, was Qi Li's faction. The second one was Qi Li's faction. Qi Zhengtao and Qi Yuanlong, who were supposed to be staunch supporters of Qi Li, were the vanguard of Qi Song's faction at this time. Not everyone liked to be a lackey. For high-level struggles like this, most of the people were immortals fighting. They were relatively far away. Although it was good to succeed the emperor, they didn't see those who failed the emperor. Their families would be ruined, and their families would be ruined. These ordinary employees didn't have any intention of getting involved in this kind of fight. So after these people heard Qi Jingtao's words, they just stood there. Some even took a few steps back, but no one came over. You bastards, you don't have to come tomorrow. You're all fired. And you Jiang Hai, this isn't over. Seeing that these people were not moving, Qi Jingtao was also angry. He pointed at the people around him and shouted loudly. But to be honest, Jiang Hai felt a little pity for Qi Yuanlong. Although he didn't have any talent in business, he was still considered a normal person. How did he give birth to Qi Jingtao, who seemed to have an abnormal mind? Did he really think that the Qi family was under his control? Even a sweeper could tell that he had no real power here. He wanted to fire someone? He did not have the authority to do so. He did not have the ability to do so. Who told you that this is over? Looking at Qi Jingtao in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. Then he slowly stepped over the bodies of these security guards and walked to Qi Jingtao with a calm face. When Jiang Hai was in the office just now, he found that Jiang Hai seemed to have grown taller. But at this time, when Jiang Hai stood up, he found that this was not his illusion. Jiang Hai had really grown taller. He was almost a head taller than him. Although Qi Jingtao was not very reliable, his height was still quite good. He was about 1.8 meters tall. Now that Jiang Hai was a head taller than him, it meant that Jiang Hai's height was infinitely close to 2 meters. In fact, it was almost the same. Jiang Hai was about 1.96 meters tall. With such a height and Jiang Hai's dislike of wearing leather shoes, he seemed to only have 2 formal suits. The total number of times he had worn them could be counted with 2 hands. At other times, he was wearing outdoor clothes and sportswear. Just like now, he was wearing sportswear with a sweater and a hoodie on the outside. His trousers were also very ordinary loose-legged sweatpants. He was carrying a small backpack on his back. To be honest, no one could tell that he was a rich man. The most valuable Patek Philippe watch on him was also covered by the sleeves of his hoodie. No one could tell that he was a rich man. His most valuable Patek Philippe watch was also covered by the sleeves of his hoodie. No one could tell. At this time, he was also wearing a pair of running shoes. His running shoes were the Air Max series running shoes that were very comfortable to wear. This kind of running shoes was jokingly called the outer height, because the air cushion could be seen. When one stepped on it, it was quite soft and comfortable. And the most important thing was that these shoes were about 3 or 4 centimeters high. With these shoes, Jiang Hai was really infinitely close to 2 meters. Now standing in front of Qi Jingtao, he was very oppressive. What are you doing? What do you want to do? How dare you hit me? Looking at Jiang Hai's size and the miserable appearance of the security guards in the distance, Qi Jingtao was a little confused. However, he was not a person who would admit defeat. At this time, he still straightened his neck and said with a tough face. He had no choice. He had never learned to admit defeat in his life. Since he was a child, his parents had been very indulgent to him. He could have anything he wanted. It was said that the poor raised the son and the rich raised the daughter. But in the Northeast, things were often the opposite. Because the older generation would more or less have some thoughts of favoring boys over girls. Qi Jingtao was the only male in the Qi family. Since he was a child, Qi Li's grandfather and grandmother had been very indulgent to him. It was not an exaggeration to say that they would give him anything he wanted. As the old saying went, the youngest son and the eldest grandson were the lifeblood of the old man and the old woman. When the youngest son and the eldest grandson appeared in the same family, it was not as simple as favoritism. Since he was a child, Qi Jingtao would get whatever he wanted. When he hit Qi Li, her grandfather and grandmother would also say that Qi Li was wrong. Who told you to provoke him? Therefore, Qi Li's relationship with her grandfather and grandmother was very bad. Therefore, people like Qi Jingtao and his character were very much related to the fact that he had never been beaten since he was a child. He was invincible since he was a child. When he was in school, Qi Li's father had already succeeded in starting a business. His father could be considered to have been brought up a little. At least he was not short of money. He was even more spoiled. Since he was in elementary school, he was a bully. Even the teachers did not dare to control him. When he entered society, his father protected him, so no one dared to provoke him. In the Qi family, it was probably the biggest setback he had suffered, but he only became a small official. At the same time, his father had always instilled in him the idea that the Qi family was passed down to the male and not the female. Although Qi Li was powerful now, she was after all a woman, and he was the legitimate son of the family. In the future, he would inherit the company. He was the master of the family. Otherwise, how could he be so arrogant? In his opinion, Jiang Hai was a stinky beggar. As the master of the family, he naturally could hit and scold as he wanted. How could Jiang Hai dare to talk back? However, he was thinking too much. This was not the ancient times. Jiang Hai not only dared to talk back, but also dared to hit him. Seeing his gaze, Jiang Hai could not help but laugh. He directly slapped him. Slap! With a loud sound, Qi Jingtao was directly slapped to the ground by Jiang Hai. In an instant his face swelled up. Then, his face was full of anger and disbelief. He glanced at Jiang Hai, who was standing in front of him, and his pupils kept dilating. F***ck your grandmother, I'm going to kill you. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, Qi Jingtao roared. He stood up and wanted to wave his fist at Jiang Hai, but unfortunately, Jiang Hai grabbed his hand in an instant. Then, Jiang Hai grabbed his collar with his right hand and pulled him up from the ground. Seeing Jiang Hai lift a person so easily, many people around him gasped. What are you doing? Let go of him. At this time in the distance, two people walked down the stairs. Seeing Jiang Hai's action, the person in front couldn't help but shout loudly. Seeing this person appear, many people nearby couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This was because they also knew this person, Qi Yuanlong, one of the founding members of the Qi family, and Qi Jingtao's father. Unlike Qi Jingtao, Qi Yuanlong still had some influence in the company. He could even influence the board of directors. Jiang Hai, let go of him. Looking at Jiang Hai pulling his son, Qi Yuanlong roared. TCH. Looking at Qi Yuanlong with disdain, Jiang Hai indeed let go. But at the same time, he also kicked the guy's chest, sending him flying horizontally. The guy flew for about 5 meters before he fell to the ground. After sliding for some distance, he began to lie on the ground and scream miserably. Qi Yuanlong's eyes were filled with disdain as he looked at Jiang Hai. His scream was almost the same as the scream of the pig when Jiang Hai was about to kill it. It was harsh and unpleasant with a trace of panic. You dare to do this, you bastard. Go arrest him for me. Seeing that Jiang Hai dared to hit his son in front of him, Qi Yuanlong knew that he had never hit his son before. How could he bear it when Jiang Hai dared to hit his son? He pointed at the people around him and shouted loudly. When Qi Jingtao ordered this group of people, these people could ignore it. But when Qi Yuanlong said this, these people had some hesitation. This was because Qi Yuanlong could really fire them. But considering Jiang Hai's strength, these people were a little scared. Let's see who dares. Just as these people were in a deadlock, a cold female voice came from a distance. Then, under everyone's gaze, Qi Li came out of the elevator with Du Ning. She looked at the people on the scene with a strong aura, and then glanced at the employees of the Qi family. Seeing Qi Li appear, these employees naturally retreated. What a joke. Qi Li's prestige in the Qi family was not comparable to Qi Yuanlong's. Chapter 848. What? Are you rebelling? Hurry up and get to work. Walking to Jiang Hai's side, Qi Li's body shook. She glanced at the people here. In an instant, many people who were watching the show turned away. They couldn't afford to offend Qi Li. You came at the right time. Your husband hit my son. How are you going to settle this? Seeing that Qi Li came over and intimidated the crowd, Qi Yuanlong also knew that his idea of mobilizing the crowd was shattered. However, this matter couldn't be settled like this. Looking at his son who was still retching, his heart was about to break. He pointed at Qi Li and said loudly, "Oh, well done. You don't know how to discipline your son. My husband helped you discipline him. You should thank us." Glancing at Jiang Hai and seeing that he wasn't injured, Qi Li also breathed a sigh of relief. Then, she looked at Qi Jingtao with some disgust, and said very indifferently, You, this is your brother. The same blood flows in his body as yours. You woman, don't you have any shame?" Hearing Qi Li's words, Qi Yuanlong roared with a face full of anger. In his opinion, how could Qi Li be like this? This was her brother, the baby of their family. How could she let an outsider hit him? Well done, but you hit him a little too lightly. But what's the situation here? Hearing Qi Yuanlong's words, Qi Li just glanced at Qi Jingtao indifferently, then smiled and asked Jiang Hai, "These security guards came to make trouble for me. After I knocked them down, the mastermind behind the scenes jumped out. He begged me to hit him, so I fulfilled his wish." Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai shrugged gently and said to her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Yuanlong trembled with anger. He had never seen someone as shameless as Jiang Hai. Of course, Jiang Hai had never seen someone as shameless as Qi Jingtao and Qi Yuanlong. "Don't you feel even the slightest bit of guilt for lying there? It was clearly you who recklessly injured the security guard. My son came over to question you, and then you became angry out of shame and hit my son. Now not only do you not repent, but you are also inverting right and wrong. Are you still human?" Qi Yuanlong roared loudly as he looked at Jiang Hai. Upon hearing his words, many passers-by could not help but lower their heads. Some people were born to be shameless and did not need to be learned. Heh, he's really shameless. There are surveillance cameras here. You'll know once you take a look. Hearing Qi Yuanlong's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but chuckle. He suddenly felt pity for Qi Song. Was it really good to have such a pig as a teammate? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Yuanlong waved his hand and said loudly with a righteous look, "My son's character is obvious to all. He doesn't need to look at this at all. Even if he did, who knows if you changed it?" When Jiang Hai heard his words, he was so shocked that he didn't know what to do. This conversation constantly refreshed his understanding of the lower limits of a person's character. This father and son pair was really top quality to the point of making one's hair stand on end. They are really shameless to the extreme. Let's go. Talking to such people is insulting my IQ. With a shrug, Jiang Hai said to Qi Li with slight embarrassment. He didn't know that Qi Li had been facing such an opponent. Jiang Hai talked to him for 5 minutes, and felt that his IQ had been pulled down by 100 points in an instant. If he fought with such people all day long, Jiang Hai found it hard to imagine that he could face the world correctly. "Oh, it's good that you know." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li shrugged gently, and then naturally took Jiang Hai's arm. At the same time, she looked at the security guards who were still lying on the ground in front of her. "You people have been fired. If you have anything to say, go to the police station and say it." Looking at these people, she once again restored her Ice Queen appearance, and said very coldly. Hearing Qi Li's words, these people also smiled helplessly. They knew that this time they stood on the wrong side. Jiang Hai turned out to be Qi Li's husband. Even if they broke their brains, they couldn't imagine that Jiang Hai was Qi Li's husband. Now they really wanted to cry and say that fairy tales were all lies. In their view, Qi Li's husband must be the kind of dragon among men. He had the appearance, height, and knowledge. He was dressed in a suit and leather shoes. He looked like a refined scum. How could he be like Jiang Hai now? He wasn't handsome and wore sportswear. He didn't look like a business elite, nor did he look like a refined scum. Except for his height, he was very ordinary. If he was thrown into a crowd, he wouldn't make a splash. They knew that this time they had kicked an iron plate, so they didn't resist Qi Li's words. If they didn't speak, they could still go to the finance department to get their salary. If they spoke, they probably wouldn't get a fart. And most importantly, they also knew that there were surveillance cameras here. They couldn't count on the police. Like Qi Yuanlong. What his son said was the truth and the law of this world. After all, there were still more normal people. Qi Li, you two murderers. You are a pair of dogs. You don't deserve to be surnamed Qi. Watching Jiang Hai and Qi Li walk out, Qi Yuanlong also shouted loudly. He knew that no one could make a decision for him now. He was also a person who cherished his life. He definitely couldn't risk his life to fight Jiang Hai, so he could only shout there. But it was useless. You have to fight with these mad dogs here every day. It's really hard on you. But why don't you kill them? After leaving the hall, Jiang Hai and Qi Li went directly to the parking lot in front of the company. The Qi group had a total of 2 parking lots. One was in front of the main entrance, with a total of about 30 parking spaces. The other was the underground parking lot, with a total of 2 floors. The underground parking lot was naturally for the company's people to park. The small parking lot above ground was specially prepared for the people who came to do business, the VIPs, and the company's top executives, such as Qi Li and the others. After getting in Qi Li's Rolls-Royce, Jiang Hai and Qi Li sat in the back, and Du Ning went to the front to drive. Jiang Hai asked in confusion, because these guys were mentally unstable, it meant that there were many loopholes. It shouldn't be difficult to get rid of them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li slowly said, in the beginning, when I just took over the Qi group, it was not good for me to do it to my uncle and eldest brother. Although they were fighting for power, after all, they were protecting the Qi group's reputation. In fact, it was understandable, whether it was Qi Song or Qi Yuanlong. As long as the Qi group existed, they were shareholders of the Qi group. Not only were they rich, but they also had a certain social influence. When Qi Li's father passed away, there were many outside companies that wanted to come and break up the Qi group. At that time, although there were internal struggles for power, as long as it was for the good of the Qi group, they were still willing to help. At that time, there was no way to separate them, so they could only integrate all the forces. This was inevitable. Later, the Qi group stabilized. When they were stirring up trouble, I gave them a warning, but the backlash from the board of directors was very fierce. They were all old members of the Qi group, and those old people were all afraid. A new emperor brings in new ministers, and the bow is put away when the birds are gone. Therefore, after that warning, they became more active. Even Qi Song's family was very close to the Yin family. Seeing that Jiang Hai understood, Qi Xian continued to talk. For this period of history, Jiang Hai also knew a little about it. However, after the fall of the Yin family, Qi Song's family restrained a lot. Qi Yuanlong's family's real power was also taken away by me. I thought that if they just wanted to retire in the company or take control of some independent departments, I would let them have it. But I didn't expect that not long after, they would stir up trouble again. Sigh, I'm really tired. Rubbing her temples, Qi Li said with some helplessness. The last time she went to Jiang Hai's manor, she was really prepared to find a professional manager after she came back. If there was anything, she could directly have a video conference. As long as she could grasp the general direction, it would be fine. At that time, she would be with Jiang Hai every day, and give birth to a fat baby for Jiang Hai as soon as possible. This was actually the most important thing. But just as she was about to do that, she found that during the time she was gone, Qi Song and Qi Yuanlong made another move. After coming back, she had been thinking about how to deal with these guys, but under the pressure from above and the pressure from the board of directors, it was not so easy for her to get rid of these 2 forces. Although she could still suppress them, it would be a problem sooner or later. Then how do I deal with these 2 guys? Touching his chin, Jiang Hai knew the situation of these 2 guys. It was just like a prostitute on the roadside. What threat did it pose to you? In fact, there was no threat. However, these things existed just like that. Even if they didn't bite people, they would still respond to them. However, it was really troublesome to get rid of them. They might even dirty their own hands. Although Qi Li wasn't a clean freak, she didn't want to dirty her own hands. In fact, there is no way. Shaking her head, Qi Li actually wanted to get rid of these 2 people. But there were really not many ways. So it's like this. Hearing Qili say that there was no way, Jiang Hai also thought about it but soon gave up. After all, he was not the kind of business genius, and he was not very good at digging traps for others. He preferred to directly crush people instead of playing with strategies. Although Huaxia people had some talent in this area, unfortunately, Jiang Hai did not seem to have it. Forget it. Let's not talk about this sad topic. What do you want to eat tonight? Roast duck? Instant boiled mutton? Or do you want to eat stir-fried vegetables? After patting Jiang Hai, Qili stopped thinking about this problem and asked Jiang Hai with a smile. Chapter 849. What Jiang Hai wanted to eat the most now was naturally Qili. After returning home, there was no need to elaborate on what happened next. As soon as they got home, Du Ning sensibly went back to her room with a red face. Jiang Hai and Qili also walked into her room together. After closing the door, the two hugged each other. Their lips touched, and the smoke of war slowly filled the room. As the atmosphere in the room became more and more intense, the equipment on the two gradually decreased. Finally, under Jiang Hai's brute force, the last two defensive equipment on Qili's body were forcibly removed. In an instant, the indescribable existence appeared in Jiang Hai's sight. Looking at the existence in front of him, Jiang Hai licked his lips gently and stared at Qili without blinking. In the beginning, Qili also felt a bit embarrassed. However, the feelings in her heart soon overcame her shyness. In her opinion, she was Jiang Hai's wife. It was natural for a wife to be looked at by her husband like this. So she took the initiative to greet him, and their lips began to fight again. Then Qili slowly knelt in front of Jiang Hai and took some indescribable places into her mouth. Feeling Qili's movements, Jiang Hai also raised his head. The war had begun. For a war maniac like Jiang Hai, once the war began, it would not end so easily. When they returned home, it was only 2 o'clock in the afternoon. According to Qili's plan, they should reach home at 3 o'clock. Even if they fought, they should stop at 4 o'clock. Then they would rest and go out for dinner at 5 o'clock. It was just right. But obviously, she underestimated her charm and Jiang Hai's determination to fight. The war continued until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Jiang Hai's third assault came to an end. Qili didn't want to move at all except for gasping for breath. However, the expression on her face was very satisfied. As for Jiang Hai, he was obviously a little tired. After wiping off some indescribable liquid with a tissue, he covered Qili with the blanket again. Then, he went to the bathroom to wash himself, put on his clothes and walked out. "You're finally done." Seeing Jiang Hai come out, Du Ning, who was sitting on the sofa in the living room, took off her headphones helplessly. She didn't have the habit of wearing headphones, but Jiang Hai's voice was a bit loud just now. Although the house Qili bought was in a very high-end neighborhood, just this 3-bedroom, 2-living-room house alone was worth 15 million yuan. However, what was expensive was the location. As for the soundproofing of the house, it was really not that good. When she was in the room, Du Ning couldn't stand it anymore, so she came out and sat here to watch TV. Unfortunately, the sound of the TV couldn't suppress the sound, so she put on her headphones and played with her mobile phone. Seeing Jiang Hai come out, it meant that the war was over. She was relieved. "What, you can't wait?" Hearing Du Ning's words, Jiang Hai also came to her side with a smile. He picked her up directly and put her on his lap. One hand hugged her butt, the other hand rubbed her leg, and said to her with a smile, "It's for dinner, you don't want to eat." Feeling Jiang Hai's big hands, Du Ning's body couldn't help but soften. After patting Jiang Hai, she whispered in Jiang Hai's ear. It didn't matter if Jiang Hai didn't eat a meal, but the two girls still needed to eat. But looking at the time, he didn't want to wake up Qili. He didn't know how long it would take to go out to eat. Otherwise he could just eat at home. "What do we have at home?" "We can eat at home." Putting down Du Ning, Jiang Hai asked her. "At home? Usually President Qi and I really don't eat at home. In the morning, we go downstairs to the breakfast shop across the street to buy some breakfast, soy milk, fried dough sticks, or some sandwiches, bread and so on. Then we go to work. We eat at the company at noon. When we go to the steakhouse in the evening we eat there. It seems that there are only some small snacks like biscuits at home for dinner. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Ning also stood up and scratched her head, and said with some doubts. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. It seems that these two girls really don't have the talent to cook. Actually, this was normal. Logically speaking, there were not many people who knew how to cook now that each family had one child. Listening to Du Ning's words, Jiang Hai walked to the double-door refrigerator in the kitchen. After opening it, Jiang Hai found that there was really nothing in it. In addition to some water beer, there were only some snacks, but in the next compartment, there were a few boxes of things. Jiang Hai picked them up and looked at them. It was the sauce for instant boiled mutton. Oh, we had this at home last month. It was delicious, Zhang Xiuying said. Seeing Jiang Hai take out this thing, Du Ning also patted her head and said with a smile, otherwise we still eat instant boiled pot. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai thought for a moment and asked her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Ning also nodded affirmatively. Speaking of which, although she is a Huaxia person and can speak Huaxia language since she was a child, she stayed in Huaxia for too short a time. When she was very young, she was taken to Wulan to learn the skills. After the mission, although she performed more missions in the east, she didn't eat much instant boiled mutton and hot pot. Hearing Jiang Hai say that he wants to eat this, she immediately nodded with a face of approval. Looking at her little foodie, Jiang Hai also smiled and ordered what to eat tonight. Since he ordered what to eat, Jiang Hai also looked at whether there was a pot or something like that. He had to admit that although Qili doesn't know how to cook, she is really a rich person. Her kitchen is hardly used. However, the kitchen was spotless, and everything was quite complete. Not only is there a normal induction cooker, but there is also a big pot, and there is even an old-fashioned hot pot. Jiang Hai knew at a glance that the kitchen was quite complete with equipment and so on. Since they are cooking now, they are going to buy groceries. Jiang Hai didn't stay in the capital for long, so he is not very familiar with it. But fortunately, there is a GPS everywhere now, so it is very convenient to go to the supermarket. Jiang Hai searched on his mobile phone and confirmed a nearby supermarket. Then he went downstairs with Du Ning and went to the nearby supermarket to buy mutton first. Although the mutton here is far inferior to the Ujimkin sheep raised in Jiang Hai's manor, he still has to buy it. Today, he is going to eat the capital's style instant boiled mutton. The Xuan-style hot pot needs more troublesome and more things. With Jiang Hai's lack of talent in cooking, just the stir-fry ingredients may be a little difficult for him. Instant boiled mutton is easier. After buying 4 pounds of freshly cut mutton, Jiang Hai went to buy some scallions and ginger, which are used as the base. In addition, he specially went to the seafood area and bought some live shrimp, crabs, and some shellfish. These things can be eaten after cooking. The soup is the best instant boiled mutton soup. Jiang Hai is quite persistent about eating. After buying these base ingredients, it is the ingredients area. She especially taught Jiang Hai how to mix the ingredients of the instant boiled mutton soup. Sesame paste, chives, red bean curd, chili oil, salt, sugar, sesame oil. After all these things were prepared, Jiang Hai and Du Ning returned home and began to get busy. Qili felt a little thirsty. When she woke up, it was already 7 o'clock in the evening. She went to the bathroom in a daze and came out to drink some water. But when she saw Jiang Hai busy in the kitchen, she can't help but have a conflict of wanting to cry. In addition to being touched, her heart is more of a warm impact. It would be great if she can see such a scene every day. As for Du Ning next to her, well, she has already been ignored. Awake? Then come and help me. Although her movements were light, Jiang Hai still heard her. He turned his head and saw Qili standing there so charmingly. Jiang Hai also smiled and waved at her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qili also smiled and nodded, then walked into the kitchen and helped Du Ning. Not long after, the instant boiled mutton soup was ready. The three of them sat in the kitchen, eating the instant boiled mutton soup and singing. Life is still very wonderful. Just as Jiang Hai's side was happy and harmonious, on the other side, Qi Jingtao was sitting at the bar of a bar in the imperial capital with an unhappy face, drinking cup after cup. He was really a little angry now. Today, he wanted to find trouble with Jiang Hai. Not only did he not succeed, but he was also beaten up. His father stood up for him, but in the end he was ignored. This was enough to make him depressed. But he did not expect that after Jiang Hai and the others left, Qi Song and Qi Liangkai even scolded him. And that bitch Lucy. She was his wife, but she stood on Qi Song and Qi Liangkai's side. I knew it. This bitch must have had an affair with them. She must have had an affair. Smashing the table, Qi Jingtao felt that his anger was about to erupt. He roared loudly. Hearing his words, the people nearby, who were originally quite lively, unconsciously stepped back. There were many people like this in the bar. They didn't need to freeload off this bad luck. Give me another cup. No, give me another cup. Throwing the empty cup in his hand on the table, Qi Jingtao looked at the bartender in front of him with an unhappy expression. This bartender knew Qi Jingtao's identity, so naturally, he would not refuse to give him a drink. Hearing his words, he took a new bottle of brandy and placed it in front of him. Looking at this bottle, Qi Jingtao opened his hand to take it. However, right at this moment, a hand pressed down on the wine bottle, preventing him from moving in the slightest. Chapter 850. F***CK. Who the F***CK wants to die? Seeing that someone dared to press down on his bottle, Qi Jingtao couldn't help but curse and roar loudly. Then he looked at the person beside him, and he couldn't help but be stunned. Because the person standing beside him at this time was someone he knew. It was a Huaxia about 1.8 meters tall, but it could be seen that he wasn't small. He was wearing a black casual suit, had a crew cut, and looked very ordinary. He was the kind of person who couldn't be recognized in a crowd. But Qi Jingtao had a deep impression of this person. It's you, what's the matter? Seeing that it was this person, although Qi Jingtao was still very firm, his words unconsciously sounded a little timid, because he knew that he couldn't afford to offend this person, and the person behind this person, he couldn't afford to offend him even more. The young master is looking for you. Looking at Qi Jingtao, this person said very indifferently. Hearing his words, Qi Jingtao also glanced at the second floor, and saw a young man standing at the door of a private room, waving at him. Seeing this person appear, Qi Jingtao didn't say much, immediately stood up, took the bottle of wine, and trotted all the way. And that person followed him all the way to the second floor. And soon Qi Jingtao arrived in front of the private room. Hey, young Master Zhang, you're in a good mood. Why are you here today? Pushing open the door of the private room, Qi Jingtao said with a smile on his face, and at the same time, he poured himself a glass of wine. At this time, there were a total of 7 people in this private room, but 4 of them were standing. These 4 people were like the person who went to call Qi Jingtao just now. They were all wearing black suits, and their heads were cut with knives and axes. They stood in the corner, and almost didn't move. If it weren't for their undulating mouths, and their heads turning from time to time, it would be difficult to tell that these people were alive. In addition to these 4 people, there were 3 people, 1 man and 2 women, and Qi Jingtao knew all 3 of them. The 2 women who were dressed very simply were the 2 stars of this nightclub. The nightclub was not only a place for one-night stands, or a place to collect corpses. In the nightclub itself, there were also some escorts or professional women who couldn't be described. The 2 of them were the stars of this nightclub. It was said that they used to work in the same management company. They were considered all-round artists. They had appeared in professional productions, acted in TV dramas, walked in shows as models, and stood on the stage as car models. Unfortunately, they didn't become popular after their professional productions, and no one watched their TV dramas. Their income as models was average, so they didn't have much fame. After the age of 25, which was the golden age, they came here to be professional women who sold wine. These 2 girls usually didn't go out with others. They just sold wine to earn a commission. If they wanted to go out, they had to be liked by them. The background of this nightclub was very strong. No one dared to use force under the foot of the emperor. Even if they liked someone, it would be 80,000 yuan per person for a night, and this was the minimum. Qi Jingtao also wanted to have some kind of relationship with them. But unfortunately, The Qi Group was only a second-rate enterprise at that time. These two looked down on Qi Zhengtao and didn't agree even when he offered a price of 150,000 yuan. Although the Qi Group was now a first-class enterprise, these two still looked down on him. In Qi Zhengtao's view, these two were the top professional women in the circle of the imperial city. According to the ancient saying, they were the top artists. But from this side, it could also be seen that young Master Zhang's ability was here. He needed two people to accompany him. As for the man in the middle, needless to say, it was young Master Zhang. I rarely come out for a drink, but you annoy me. Tell me, what's going on? Looking at Qi Zhengtao, who came over with a glass of wine, young Master Zhang casually waved his hand and said indifferently, he wouldn't drink the wine Qi Zhengtao brought. First, it was because he didn't trust the wine. Second, it was because he wasn't used to drinking that kind of wine. The wine he drank was the best. It's just some family matters. By the way, young Master Zhang, Qili has already refused to let you buy the cow. Looking at young Master Zhang, Qi Zhengtao smiled awkwardly and then sat on the sofa next to him. He deliberately kept a distance from the three people. Although Qi Zhengtao was very interested in these two girls, he didn't dare to do anything in front of young Master Zhang. After sitting down, he took a sip of wine and then said to young Master Zhang, because young Master Zhang was the one who wanted to buy the cow from Qili. Oh, Qili's courage is not small. She can directly refuse. Hearing Qi Zhengtao's words, young Master Zhang couldn't help but frown. After sitting up, he picked up a piece of watermelon in front of him and took a bite and said with some surprise, this matter had been on his mind for several months. Qili didn't make up her mind earlier because she was afraid of his existence. Why did she suddenly refuse? A cornered dog will do something desperate? Sigh, it's mainly because his husband came back. No one would have thought that these cows were his husband's. Listening to young Master Zhang's words, Qi Zhengtao sighed helplessly. He really hated Jiang Hai to the core. Qili's husband, Jiang Hai. Hearing Qi Zhengtao's words, young Master Zhang's eyes suddenly narrowed, and then said slowly, Young Master Zhang knows him? Hearing that young Master Zhang actually knew Jiang Hai's name, Qi Zhengtao was a little surprised. Only you don't know. Seeing Qi Zhengtao's surprised look, young Master Zhang threw the rest of the watermelon into his mouth. He squinted his eyes and thought while chewing. Young Master Zhang's identity was still unknown. But in fact, in China, there were many people who knew Jiang Hai. Some people in politics knew Jiang Hai, because when Huaxia and Dubai were connected, Jiang Hai was the one who connected them. Even the emperor had heard about this. It could be said that Jiang Hai was one of the most influential people in the world. It was precisely because of this relationship that the Qi family was not too greedy and did not have any information that could be used against them. No matter how powerful young Master Zhang was, he did not dare to touch them easily. Recently, he knew that although there was no news about Jiang Hai from Huaxia, Jiang Hai, pastures, and beef were quite famous abroad. Now that Jiang Hai was back, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes. But he didn't care, because he couldn't touch Jiang Hai, not only because Jiang Hai was well known in China. At the same time, it was also because of Jiang Hai's current international influence, his territory in the United States, his connections with several manor owners in the United States, his connections with Du Feimin, and now his connections with South Korea. If this fierce dragon didn't express his intention to occupy the river, the original power in the river wouldn't trouble this dragon. Of course, it was impossible for Jiang Hai to look for trouble with this guy. It was not easy for others to touch him in China, but it was also not easy for him to touch others. After all, this person was not someone the Yin family could compare to. This is Jiang Hai. He is really hateful today. He dared to hit me. If it weren't for the fact that the Yin family pitied him, we wouldn't even have the money to bury his mother when she died. Now that he has become so powerful, he even dares to hit his master after coming back. Bah, this son of a bitch. Hearing that young Master Zhang also knew about Jiang Hai, Qi Zhengtao couldn't help but vent his anger. He couldn't help but complain to young Master Zhang. After hearing his words, young Master Zhang just looked at him indifferently and didn't say anything. Seeing that young Master Zhang didn't respond to this topic, Qi Jingtao, who originally wanted to provoke young Master Zhang to help him deal with Jiang Hai, couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Young Master Zhang, if you want to be powerful, Jiang Hai is the biggest obstacle here. With him and Qili together, Qili seems to have a backbone. It will be difficult for us to put pressure on her. However, Qi Jingtao's face wasn't thin, so he changed the topic to something related to young Master Zhang. Oh, isn't this your business? Young Master Zhang picked up the wine glass in front of him, took a sip, and said indifferently. Hearing young Master Zhang's words, Qi Jingtao couldn't help but feel even more embarrassed, because he really couldn't think of a way. After drinking another glass, he turned around and left with the excuse that he drank too much. Young Master, do you want us to invite Mr. Jiang over and let you talk to him in person? Seeing that there were no outsiders around, at this moment, the bodyguard couldn't help but come over and ask young Master Zhang. His words were very clear, but the meaning was very clear. Should they take action and bring Jiang Hai over? It seemed that they had done this many times in the past. The reason why Jiang Hai didn't open his business in China was mainly because he was afraid that some people would come over to invite him. You don't have enough face. That guy's strength is far beyond what you can imagine. However, young Master Zhang knew very well that the current Jiang Hai wasn't someone they could invite over. So he smiled and said slowly. Then he stood up, picked up his clothes and waved at the two stars. One on each side, went downstairs, got into his car, and left. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know about this. After he, Qili, and Du Ning had a good meal, the three of them sat at home and watched TV. At around 10 o'clock in the evening, Qili yawned and went back to sleep. As for Jiang Hai and Du Ning, it had been a long time since they last saw each other. Sometimes lightning and fire didn't need to be special. Not long after, there was a low voice in Qili's house, but it was only limited to echoing in the room. At around 12 o'clock, Jiang Hai returned to Qili's master bedroom and fell asleep with her in his arms. Chapter 851. The next morning, when Jiang Hai woke up after more than 8 hours of sleep, Qili and Du Ning had already left. After all, it was almost 9 o'clock. Qili was very good at this. She was responsible for herself. As long as she was working, she would go to the company at 9 o'clock every morning, including the time she and Du Ning had breakfast. She had been working for nearly 4 years, and she had never been late. Of course, no one knew whether she had overslept or not. Jiang Hai sat up in bed in a daze. He went to the bathroom and found a new set of towels, toothbrushes. Looking at these things, Jiang Hai smiled. Then he hummed a song and brushed his teeth. After everything was done, he directly cooked a pot of hot pot noodles with the hot pot soup from last night. After eating, Jiang Hai sat on the sofa and thought about what to do later. Qili and Du Ning had said last night that they would have lunch in the company at noon. If Jiang Hai was free, he could go to the company to find them and have lunch together. In the evening, he would go to the steakhouse to inspect and have a meal. However, Jiang Hai didn't have the habit of eating in a restaurant. Besides, he didn't like to go to Qili's company. In Jiang Hai's life, there were two places he didn't want to go the most. One was the company, and the other was the school. It was because he was tired of going to school. Honestly, whenever he saw someone say that he missed the time when he was in school, Jiang Hai wanted to spit at him to death. What he missed was the time when he was a junior or senior. Except for these 2 years, Jiang Hai really couldn't think of any good time to miss. At that time, he had enough credits and was familiar with the teachers. It didn't matter if he didn't go to class. Every morning when he got up, he would play games in the dormitory. He didn't have to worry about eating, because his father and mother would transfer money to his card every month. That was the real stress-free time. Except for these 2 years, Jiang Hai really couldn't think of anything to miss about school. When he was in elementary school, he didn't know a thing. Every day, in addition to studying and doing homework, he might be bullied by other students outside the school, or even be punished by the teachers. Jiang Hai was such a big student. How could he dare to say that he hadn't been beaten or punished by the teachers in elementary school? In junior high school, the gap between the rich and the poor began to show. Teachers treated students who were good at their studies, students who were poor in their studies, students who were rich, and students who were poor. Jiang Hai still remembered his class teacher. She was such a snobbish person who valued good students very much. In junior high school, he was in the 4th grade, but he was beaten by the teachers many times in senior high school. There was no need to talk about it. From the first year of senior high school, he started to make up lessons. He arrived at school at 6 in the morning and left school at 8 in the evening. He was almost on the last bus back home. When he reached home, it was already past 9. He took a shower and continued to do his homework. It was good enough that he could go to bed around 11. He had to wake up before 5 in the morning, eat a careless breakfast, and then take the bus to school while dozing off. After all, he had to reach school before 6. If you told Jiang Hai that you missed school, Jiang Hai really wanted to scold you to death. What was there to miss? People shouldn't follow what others say. They should have their own ideas. At least, Jiang Hai didn't miss school at all. As for the other place he didn't want to go, it was the company. After Jiang Hai graduated from university, he went out to work. To be honest, working in the company was really similar to going to school. There were 2 types of people in the company. The first type was people who just dawdled. The second type was people who wanted to improve. People who wanted to improve had to learn to have several faces. Most of these people used to be class leaders or members of the student union in school. They flattered the teachers in school and the leaders in society, hoping to be a small official. They had to work like ordinary people during the day and socialize at night. Who would be tired if these people weren't tired? These people were probably the ones who missed school. As for those who were idling around, such as Jiang Hai, they relied on the company. If the company sent them a document, they could finish it in a week, not in 6 days. Basically, they handed in the task on time. And then the rest of the time, they relied on the company. Relying on getting off work wasn't that tiring. Basically, they just needed to get along well with their colleagues. Because they didn't have the urge to climb up. It didn't conflict with everyone's interests. However, this wasn't the life Jiang Hai wanted. This was because there would be this leader, and that leader wandering around every day. Although they didn't flatter him when they met, they still had to say good things. Others could also order you to do this and that. It was really annoying. This was Jiang Hai's life from 3 years ago. There would always be someone controlling you, telling you how long you sleep, how long you work, how long you do this, and how long you do that. Jiang Hai was so tired that he didn't feel tired at all. Originally, Jiang Hai thought that this was how it should be, but now when he jumped out of this circle, after he had money, no one asked him to do anything, no one asked him to wake up at a certain time, no one asked him to work overtime, and no one dared to stare at him. Now, when Jiang Hai was asked to go to these places, he would go to watch the fun. As for the rest, he wouldn't accompany them. Therefore, after going to the Qi group yesterday, he didn't have the intention to go again today. After all, he didn't want to take over the Qi group. It didn't matter whether he went or not. However, if he didn't go, it would be boring to stay at home. He wanted to go to the capital. But to be honest, he had already been to all the places he should go. In addition, now that the northern region had started to try to heat up, the smog in the capital was quite fierce. Jiang Hai didn't want to be a human flesh inhaler. Therefore, when he was hesitating, it was almost noon. It just so happened that there was a roast duck on TV. This made Jiang Hai a little excited. After thinking for a while, he remembered that he had been to the capital a long time ago. He had eaten at the Quanjude restaurant in Dadi, and the taste was quite good. Therefore, after thinking for a while, he prepared to eat a duck. Since this was Qi Li's home, naturally, it was impossible that there was only one car for her to go to work. There were 2 cars in the garage downstairs. One was a red Porsche 911, which she usually drove. There was also a BMW 750, which was more than 2 million yuan altogether. However, it was an old car from 5 years ago. It was Qi Li's car in the past. She used this car to go out to discuss business, and so on. However, since she had a Rolls-Royce, she didn't use it anymore. Jiang Hai thought for a while. After all, the Porsche was a car. Although it was fast, it was useless in the city. Therefore, he took the car key of the BMW downstairs. He drove the car and followed the GPS to Dadi. Speaking of Dadi, people in the capital should be very familiar with it. Right in front of the front door was a commercial street, which was called Dadi Lawn. Originally, it wasn't called this name. It was originally called Corridor Sitiao. It first rose in the Yuan dynasty and was established in the Ming dynasty. It began to flourish in the Qing dynasty. However, in 1900, the old lady recruited the Boxers to come to the capital. She wanted to use the Boxers to destroy the foreigners. This was also the excuse that led to the invasion of the Eight-Nation Alliance. Then, the old lady declared war on the 11 countries at the same time. It was quite tough, but it also pushed Huaxia into the abyss. After the Boxers came to the capital, they burned down this street. After the reconstruction, it was not bad. The origin of the name Dadi was said to be in the first year of Emperor Hongzhi in the Ming dynasty. At that time, there was a curfew in the capital. In order to prevent thieves and the like from hiding in the streets and alleys, many streets in the capital were built with wooden fences. During the day, the fences were opened and closed at night, which was more convenient for management. Of course, these had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. After a long time, Jiang Hai found a parking place and entered the street. To be honest, there were many small shops and restaurants on this street. But in fact, this place was more for foreigners. In fact, the locals didn't come here often. The Quanjude that Jiang Hai went to was not the best, but it was the one that suited his taste the most. After entering Quanjude, Jiang Hai found a place to sit down. He ordered a duck inside. This duck was several times more expensive than before. He waited for the dish to be served. Not long after, the chef came and cut the duck into slices in front of Jiang Hai. This kind of roast duck's skin was crispy, and there was oil under the skin, so it was very fragrant. It could only be eaten when it was just cooked. Otherwise, it would be very greasy. After cutting the duck, Jiang Hai asked the chef to help him cook a soup. Then he began to roll the dough and eat it. He put shredded cucumber and sweet sauce inside. Jiang Hai didn't eat scallions, ginger, or onions. He could eat them when cooking, but he would pick them out. So when he rolled the dough, he didn't put them in. The meal was finished in a short time. There wasn't a single duck left, but there was a lot of soup left. After paying the bill, Jiang Hai prepared to stroll around the neighborhood. But before he could leave, two men in black appeared in front of Jiang Hai. One on the left and one on the right. They blocked Jiang Hai's way. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai frowned. He looked to the side and found that there were a lot of people watching the show. They were all looking at him with a smile. Watching a show was the nature of the Chinese. It was the same everywhere. But when he saw that there were people everywhere, and some people were even recording with their phones, Jiang Hai was relieved. He wasn't afraid of people blocking him. What he was afraid of was that someone would dare to make a move on him without him noticing. Since there were so many onlookers, Jiang Hai wouldn't be polite. Looking at the two men in front of him, Jiang Hai went straight to them. At the same time he said, "Hey, excuse me. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.